A man lies face down in a pool of blood, his life ending abruptly at 44. As his vision blurs, he thinks back to a girl he failed to protect. This was Mitsuishi Yumishio, a guy who died right before his dream of becoming a pro gamer could finally take off. Part of him wonders if this is punishment for his past, or if something else is happening. Opening his eyes again, he realizes he isn't dead after all. Instead of the afterlife, he finds himself standing in a quiet forest under a massive moon. He realizes he definitely isn't in Japan anymore. Looking down at his suit, he notices his body feels much younger and sharper. He wonders if this is actually one of those otherworld reincarnations he's heard about. Before he can finish that thought, a torch lights up the forest and a voice shouts that they found another one. Heavy boots stomp into view as the group closes in. Turning toward the noise, he finds himself surrounded by men in white capes and armor holding torches high. Instead of panicking, he just stands there taking in the strange sight. Looking at their fantasy gear up close, he figures there's no doubt about it, this is definitely a new world. Seeing their pointed ears makes it undeniable this is definitely another world. As one of the guards draws a heavy blade, it's clear they aren't just here for a friendly chat. Surrounding him completely, the leader tells him not to resist and calls him an otherworlder, warning that they'll kill him right here if he puts up a fight. He just stands there sweating, wondering how these people could possibly know his secret already. He slowly raises his hands and tells them he won't put up a fight, figuring he doesn't really have any other choice right now. Guided by flickering torchlight, the group starts moving through the dark forest. As they walk, he realizes he can actually understand their language, so he tries asking where they're heading. The guard just tells him they're almost there. The guard adds that he'll explain everything once they meet up with the rest of the group. Hearing that there are others involved makes him wonder if he's not the only one who was brought here. He sees exactly what they meant when he's led into a clearing packed with more captives. A group of rough-looking guys sits huddled on the ground, all dressed in modern clothes like hoodies and graphic tees. Looking at their tattoos and scars, it's pretty obvious these aren't just average people from Earth. The group is a strange mix, featuring everyone from heavily tattooed thugs to students still in their school uniforms. Slumping together on the ground, they all look pretty worn out and confused. He stands before the mismatched group, noticing their nationalities seem to be all over the place. Looking at their faces, he confirms that every single one of them came from his world. Just then, a guard shoves him forward and tells the leader he's the final catch. Commander Isekai'd gives a cold smirk, deciding it's time to start the explanation. He raises a hand and tells everyone to listen up, reminding the group that they all died back in their original world. The tattooed thugs listen in silence as he continues the speech. Even the high schoolers look stunned when he tells them they were specifically chosen to be summoned here. Looking down at his tie, Yumishio listens as the commander calls them lucky for getting a second chance at life. Finally, Isekai'd makes it clear that they owe everything to the king, meaning their lives aren't exactly their own anymore. Isekai'd explains their new job is to serve as the kingdom's representative fighters, facing off against champions from other nations. Hearing this, Yumishio stares in disbelief as the title rings in his head. One of the scruffier guys nearby sounds pretty annoyed, asking what a fighter even is. The commander clarifies that it's a role for otherworlders who use their wits and technique to win one-on-one duels. He explains that these battles between otherworlders are the hottest thing in the world right now. A massive global tournament is actually on the horizon, and every nation is scrambling to find their own champion. Hearing the news, a guy with heavy piercings perks up as he realizes they're being scouted for the national team. He gets a smug look on his face, already treating the whole thing like a job interview he's already passed. Another thug joins in with a nasty grin, telling the guards they better start giving them the star treatment they deserve. One of the thugs lets out a greedy laugh, but Isekai'd immediately tells him not to get it twisted. Sitting casually, the commander admits he's picking people for a tournament, though the reality is far from a promotion. He explains that representative is just a fancy label for what they actually are. To the nobles and rurals, this whole spectacle is just dinner theater to enjoy while they eat. Leaning in with a mocking smile, he tells them they were brought here for one reason, to risk their lives for the amusement of the elites. To drive the point home, he looks down at the mangled body of one of the captives and calls them nothing more than a sideshow. Hearing the schoolgirls scream in terror doesn't change his cold expression. He simply mentions that replacements are easy to find, so he is happy to get rid of anyone who is weak or rebellious. Watching the scene, Yumishio realizes his big fresh start is actually turning into a total nightmare. Isekai'd looks down at them, musing that since they're supposed to be a spectacle, he has a bit of a problem. Scanning the group, he notes that there are just too many people in this batch. One of the elven guards chimes in with a smirk, suggesting it might be easier if they just got rid of a few right now. Listening to them joke about it, Yumishio realizes these guys don't see them as humans, just toys for them to play with. One of the elf guards grabs a girl in a suit, mentioning that they don't mind having extra women around. Leaning in with a nasty grin, he promises to give them a very warm welcome later on. She tries to pull away in disgust, but he just stays glued to her. Since they want to keep the girls, the guards figure it's only the men who need to be thinned out. Isekai'd scans the remaining guys, casually wondering which one he should get rid of first. Watching this, Yumishio keeps his eyes glued to the ground, knowing that if he stands out for even a second, he's dead. Isekai'd speaks up, ordering everyone to pair up immediately. This catches the guys off guard, and they start whispering about what he has planned. Glaring at them, he just says it'll be a surprise for later. As the guards draw their weapons to stop the chatter, the group realizes that picking a partner is a choice that affects their very lives. Isekai'd stands over them with a cruel grin, reminding everyone he's looking to cut down the numbers. Realizing this is a calling, Yumishio knows picking the right teammate is the difference between life and death. He starts checking out the other captives, eyeing an honest man who seems reliable. Another guy is scruffy and mean, looking like he knows his way around a fight. There's even a cocky kid who doesn't seem bothered by the guards at all. Taking a deep breath, he closes his eyes to focus. Making the right move at the exact right moment used to be his specialty, and he needs those pro-gamer instincts to kick in right now. Just as those instincts start firing, a big man with glasses walks up and asks if Yumishio is from Japan. He drops a heavy hand on his shoulder and suggests they team up right then and there. Yumishio freezes, wondering why such a huge guy would want to partner with someone who looks so weak. The guy seems friendly enough, but more importantly, he is easily the biggest person in the entire group. Yumishio asks him straight up why he's choosing the smallest guy in the room to team up with. Staring back in silence, he is clearly caught off guard by the guy's strange confidence. As the man keeps talking, Yumishio remembers the guards mentioning how they want fighters who can use both their heads and their skills. Cracking his knuckles, the gent explains that while he's got the power side covered, he's a bit worried about the mental part of the trial. Essentially, he chose Yumishio because he figures the former pro gamer is likely the smartest person in the whole group. Giving a big, overly friendly smile, he adds that he loves Japanese people because they're kind and never betray their friends. Yumishio mulls it over, figuring a team based on knowledge and skill isn't such a bad idea. Around the room, the other prisoners are already scrambling to find their own partners. Seeing the clock ticking, he realizes he needs to make a move. He decides to gamble on the man's intuition and tells him he's in. With a firm handshake, the deal is done, and the big man lets out a breath of relief. As the big man sighs, a nearby torch crackles, signaling that the time for picking partners is finally up. Stepping forward, Isekai'd notes that every single person has finally found someone to stand next to. Yumishio takes a long look around, mentally grading the other teams based on their physical and mental strength. Some look like pure thugs, while others are already shouting and losing their composure. Looking at the rest of them, the whole crowd seems pretty disorganized and uneven. He figures his own team actually has the best balance of the bunch, giving them a real edge in whatever trial comes next. That confidence hits a wall when the commander flashes a sharp grin and prepares to drop the next bombshell. That bombshell is a simple order. Everyone has to fight the partner they just picked. Realizing the trap, he freezes on the spot as he thinks about the massive teammate he just shook hands with. Isekai'd explains that only the winners will be taken to the capital as official gladiator candidates. He ends with a sharp grin, leaving the fate of the losers unsaid. He stares in disbelief as the reality of disposal hits him. This isn't just a disqualification, it's an immediate execution for anyone who loses. Clenching his fist, he realizes this is the total opposite of the cooperation he prepared for. When he turns to his partner, he asks what they're supposed to do now that they have to destroy each other. Just as he shouts that the big man's intuition was dead wrong, the guy responds with a creepy, silent smirk. Actually, he chuckles and says everything went exactly as he planned. Gesturing toward the elven guards, he mentions how the people in charge view them all as disposable trash. Forcing partners to kill each other is just the most efficient way to thin the crowd by half. While Yumishio stands there frozen in shock, the man admits that's the exact reason he chose him. He specifically says he looked like the most pathetic, weak-willed middle-aged man in the entire room. Watching the tension rise, Isekai'd asks which pair wants to start the first match. The big man doesn't hesitate for a second, cheerfully raising his hand to volunteer them. After Isekai'd gives the green light to start immediately, Yumishio can only wonder what kind of psycho he just teamed up with. He looms over the space, finally showing off a physique that belongs on a heavyweight wrestler. Between the calm glasses and the heavy tattoos, he looks like a literal tank ready to roll over anything in its way. Yumishio realizes he is staring down a wall of pure muscle. Isekai'd raises his hand and gives the signal to start. Nearby guards are already getting fired up, shouting at them to show some spirit and get moving. He just stands there in a cold sweat, trying to process everything. As an average middle-aged guy from Earth, a duel to the death is the last thing he's ready for. Meanwhile, the big man calmly takes off his glasses with a confident smirk. Looking at the guy's sheer size, the weight difference feels totally unfair. One simple rule rings in his head: if he loses this, he's dead. Before he can even finish the thought, a massive fist comes swinging straight for his face. The blow connects with a heavy thud, snapping his head back as he realizes there is no way he can win this. Stumbling back across the stone floor, he gasps for air while trying to keep his feet under him. Looking amused, the big man notes that the old guy is surprisingly sturdy for surviving a direct hit to the face. While he wipes his mouth, Yumishio realizes something strange. The impact looked devastating, but the actual damage feels surprisingly low. Clenching his fist, he knows standing still is an option if he wants to survive. Since his opponent is built like a tank, he figures his only opening is speed. If he can just stay mobile and wait for the guy to tire out, he might win. How about this next one? The gent shouts, lunging back in to finish him off. This next punch is a massive, wide hook that's even slower and more telegraphed than the first one. Watching the movement closely, Yumishio realizes he can easily get out of the way of a swing this big. He prepares to slip to the side and launch his first real counterattack. But before he can even shift his weight, a massive fist connects right with his jaw. The force is incredible, lifting him off his feet and snapping his head back like a ragdoll. He skids across the stone floor, eventually coming to a stop in a thick cloud of dust. Standing a few feet away, the big man admires his own power with a smug grin. While he struggles to push himself up, Yumishio tries to ignore the ringing in his ears. His face is a mess of blood and dirt, but he's mostly confused about why he couldn't get out of the way. The big man stalks closer, jokes that it's dangerous to take a nap in the middle of a fight. Looking back at the exchange, he realizes he didn't just fail to dodge, it felt like his body was physically locked in place. He lies there staring at the ceiling, gasping for air as he tries to make sense of what just happened. The big man towers over him, laughing about how lucky he is to be paired with such a weak opponent for his first match. Looking right into his eyes, The giant admits he thought his life would end behind bars, but this new world is the perfect place to keep his streak going. Yumishio asks if he was really a prisoner, watching the giant loom over him, naming himself a convict. The man doesn't even try to hide his past. He lets out a twisted grin, drooling as he brags about murdering 3 kids and 2 women back on Earth. This guy wasn't just some common thief, he was a death row inmate who got a second chance at violence. Staring up at him, Yumishio realizes he's dealing with a literal monster who was executed before ending up here. He starts stomping on Yumishio's head, laughing about how much he enjoys picking on the weak. Grinning, he explains that he targeted Yumishio because he knows Japanese people are soft and easy to exploit. As he continues the beating, he yells up to the guards, asking if this is the kind of performance they need to see for him to climb the ranks. He calls everyone else here a bunch of cowards who are too afraid of real violence to survive. He's basically having the time of his life, laughing like a maniac about how much he loves this new world. While the killer celebrates, Yumishio lies face down in the dirt, calling himself an idiot for letting things get this bad. Thinking back to his old life, he remembers a promise he made to never screw up a big choice again. Back on Earth, he'd let some thugs at the arcade push him around, and the memory of that weakness still stings. Suddenly, his fingers dig into the dirt as he clenches his fist, deciding he won't go out without landing at least one solid punch. Up in the stands, the girls in the crowd watch the scene in dead silence. Even the tougher prisoners look like they've already written the guy off. The killer wipes sweat from his neck, his chest heaving from the effort of the attack. He looks up at the commander and calls out, saying the fight is finally over. Staring down at the motionless body, he gives a smug grin and claims the win for himself. The elven guards look completely bored, figuring the match was way too one-sided to be worth watching. While they lose interest, the other prisoners start arguing about who has to go next, though nobody wants to be the next victim. Looking annoyed by the delay, the killer asks the guards why they stopped the show. He glances down at the body with a nasty look, wondering why the old man is still making noise. Just then, a faint whisper comes from the dirt, rasping out the word death. Before the killer can process what's happening, Yumishio lunges up and drives a fist straight into the man's face. Staggering back, he screams in pure confusion, demanding to know how the guy is even still alive. Shouts fill the air as the other prisoners realize the old man actually landed a solid hit. Even the commander stays quiet, seemingly intrigued by the sudden life in his prisoner. The killer lets out a dismissive grunt, though he is clearly rattled. He wipes blood from his chin, wondering how he's still in one piece after taking so many direct hits. Looking down at his suit, he realizes those strikes while he was on the floor didn't actually leave a single mark. It matches how he couldn't move side to side earlier, as if he were locked onto a flat to deplane. Somehow, his own weak punch hit the big guy like a heavy-duty counter, dealing massive damage. Standing his ground, he starts to suspect the truth about this world and asks the killer for a quick favor. The favor is simple. He points to his own chest and tells the killer to hit him again with everything he's got. The crowd looks on in total confusion, figuring the guy has finally lost his mind. Even the killer is sweating now, insulted that his earlier hits didn't seem to count for anything. Still, he keeps the taunts coming, telling the man he needs a real strike to confirm his theory about this world. Taking the bait, the killer's fist tightens as he prepares to deliver one last blow. He pulls his arm back with a wild look, promising to put everything he's got into this hit. Refusing to flinch, Yumishio just stands his ground and watches the massive fist come at him. The strike connects with a heavy boom that echoes through the room. Instead of going down, he plants his feet and holds a perfect guard to catch the full force of the punch. The big guy screams in frustration, demanding to know how the old man is still on his feet. While the brute stares up in total disbelief, he stands his ground without shifting an inch. Looking down with a calm gaze, he admits he's feeling pretty relaxed right now. Normally, that massive weight difference would have sent him flying across the room. Since he didn't even budge, he's now certain this world doesn't follow regular physics, It's built on a completely different set of rules. The killer screams about snapping his arms, but Yumishio just looks away, trying to pin down the exact mechanics at play. Thinking back to his professional days, he remembers debating how game logic differs from real combat. In those games, the developers made blocking incredibly strong and way easier to pull off than in a real fight. There aren't any cross-ups or ways to hit a downed opponent, making the defense almost impossible to crack. Even as the killer rains down a flurry of strikes, the hits just clatter against his arms with no effect. Without a way to bypass the guard, the brute finds himself stuck in a loop he can't win. Usually, that's where things like unblockable moves come in to break the stalemate. Since every character has a throw move, he reaches in and easily hoists the massive guy over his shoulder. Despite the huge weight difference, he handles the giant like he's made of paper, showing off the ultimate unblockable counter. He slams the massive killer into the ground with a bone-shattering thud. The guards are completely stunned, whispering that the move looked like something from a top-tier professional fighter. Even the commander watches in silence, a small, knowing look crossing his face. Standing over the downed giant, Yumishio is now certain that this new world follows the exact same rules as the games he mastered back home. It takes him back to the days spent in dark arcades, obsessed with the hobby that defined his entire first life. He eventually walked away from it all for some boring, everyday reasons, letting his path just end. Looking at his hand against the dirt floor, he realizes that his dream didn't actually die, it just moved to a much more dangerous stage. Even with tears in his eyes, a wide, jagged smile spreads across his face. He realizes this new world is a game he finally knows how to play. Honestly, for a guy who lost his passion years ago, he's never felt more alive. He clenches his fist as the final piece of the puzzle clicks into place. This world is built on the exact same rules as a fighting game down to the very last mechanic. Same moves, same timing, same logic. For the first time, he isn't just surviving, he's playing to win. Scrambling back to his feet, the killer yells that a single throw won't win the match. He's livid, spitting insults and calling Yumishio a middle-aged monkey who stands no chance against him. Yumishio just stares him down and admits that back on Earth, a weak guy like him would have been completely helpless. But in this new world, things are different because age, gender, and status don't count for anything. He wipes his face with a wide grin, knowing victory only goes to the person who makes the right call at the perfect time. Shifting his weight, he figures he is actually pretty lucky to be in this position. Since his opponent is just a beginner who doesn't know the rules, he moves in for the kill without feeling bad about it. As the big guy tries to back away, he immediately shuts him down with a quick low sweep. He follows the sweep by leaping into the air to keep the momentum going. Thinking back to Earth, he remembers how everyone says Japanese people are supposed to be kind and polite. That is definitely not the case here, as he goes for a brutal attack while the guy is still struggling to stand. He figures there are just some people out there who simply live for the struggle of a fight. The second he sees his strike land, he confirms the hit and gets ready to pour on even more damage. He lets loose with a rapid-fire flurry, unloading every bit of momentum into the guy's face. Each punch lands with a heavy impact, locking the killer into a loop of pure pain, leaving no room for a counter. He keeps the pressure on until the sequence is complete. It's clear now that he's playing this world exactly like the arcade cabinets back home. He lets out a roar, shouting that even a trashy guy like him belongs in a world like this. This isn't just about winning a fight. It's a moment of pure defiance as he finally claims his spot in a reality built for gamers. He finished the sequence with a massive uppercut, shouting for the guy to remember what a full combo looks like. The punch connects perfectly with his chin, landing with everything he has left. The impact sends the killer crashing hard onto the cold stone floor. Staring down at the limp body, it's obvious the guy is completely out cold. He throws his head back and lets out a massive victory roar, shouting that this world is the best. The onlookers can't believe the middle-aged guy won, but for him, it proves his life as a gamer wasn't a waste after all. The commander walks over and asks him who he actually is. He doesn't hesitate, introducing himself as Mitsuishi Yumishio. Offering a firm handshake, the knight calls himself Kyle and officially welcomes him as a fellow fighter. It feels like a continuation of a life he thought was over, only now he's in a world that shares his favorite rules. Yumishio walks along with his hands bound, being led through the dark by guards with torches. Even though he's technically a captive, he makes a vow to himself to become the strongest fighter in this entire world. The group slowly disappears into the shadows, leaving the arena behind as they head toward his new life. Behind them, the inmate is left in a bloody mess on the floor, serving as a grim reminder that this world doesn't have a respawn button. They leave the mess behind and step out into the sunlight, where the scale of the capital finally hits them. It is a massive stone city tucked into the mountains, bustling with life and activity. Towering spires and grand buildings line the path as they move deeper toward the heart of the kingdom. Once they reach the inner gates, Kyle leads the line of captives through the cold stone halls. He welcomes the newcomers to their destination, keeping his tone professional even while they are in chains. Suddenly, a woman's voice rings out from the shadows. She begins to introduce herself, though the group can only see a glimpse of her long hair. She steps fully into the light and introduces herself as Queen Kila Chaos, the ruler of this entire kingdom. With a sharp, fanged grin, she explains that strength is the only law in this land. In her world, being weak means you don't even deserve basic human rights. Yumishio, intimidated by the queen's speech, figuring he's ready for whatever rules this world has. To him, a world where the strong rule is just like the old school arcades where you either win or get kicked off the machine. Then, Kila gestures to the side, telling them all to look and see the miserable end of those who weren't strong enough. While the man with glasses is visibly shaken by what's on the screen, the gamer just stares. He realizes sympathy has no place in a world where only the winners matter. Kila looms over him with a wild grin, looking like a final boss waiting for her turn. Keeping his cool, he stares ahead with the focus of a man who's dealt with toxic players before. It's him against her world now, and he figures he just needs to play the game better than anyone else. But the game gets personal when he spots a girl chained up in the middle of the room. He recognizes her as Nazuna and realizes she's another person who got pulled into this world. Seeing her like that, he wonders how many others from his old life are suffering the same fate. Still, taking action right now is a massive risk that would turn every guard in the palace against him. As he weighs his options, a literal game prompt pops up in his head, forcing him to choose between saving her or walking away. Yumishio runs the numbers, realizing a failed rescue attempt probably means certain death for both of them. On the flip side, abandoning her means she go through hell, but he gets to keep his own life. Looking at the floor, he tries to convince himself that staying quiet is the only smart move. Just then, one of the guards lets out a nasty laugh, telling Nazuna to scream for him like she did last night. She looks completely shattered, eyes welling up as she silently begs for someone to save her. Instead of walking away, Yumishio snaps and throws a heavy punch right into the guard's face. He screams at the guy, completely dropping his plan to stay under the radar. The guard crashes to the floor as Yumishio keeps his guard up, immediately asking Nazuna if she's alright. It's a bold move that leaves the entire room stunned. Nazuna stares up through her tears, wondering who this person even is. Recognition hits her instantly, and she whispers his old title from their previous life in total shock. Gritting his teeth, Yumishio calls himself an idiot for even considering the safe choice of leaving her behind. A brief memory of her smile flashes by, a painful reminder that he already failed her once before. Making the same mistake twice would mean he's finished, not just as a man, but as a gamer who's supposed to learn from his losses. He looks her right in the eyes and promises that this time, he's picking the winning move. He steps in front of Nazuna, using his arm to shield her from the rest of the room. While she stares at him through her tears, he makes it official. He isn't leaving her side again. It's a heavy promise to make in the middle of a palace full of enemies, but he's already decided to stick with it. Nizuna stares up at him, her eyes wide as she whispers his old name in total disbelief. One of the armored guards asks if they should just execute him on the spot, but the demon queen stops him, curious to see what the guy will do next. He finds himself surrounded by elven soldiers, his mind racing to find a way to keep her safe from all of them. Reminding himself of the rules, he knows this entire world functions exactly like a fighting game. The problem is that a single sword strike from a high-level guard counts as an unblockable, instant kill move. If they even manage to draw their blades, it is game over, so he has to figure out the perfect counter-strategy before they even have a chance to move. He drops low and catches the first guard with a sharp leg sweep, sending him straight to the floor. Moving quickly, he slides over and trips the next one before the guy can even react. It's a chain reaction of fallen guards as he keeps the momentum going through the group. This move is a staple in almost every fighting game since it's the easiest way to force a knockdown. As long as they're on the ground, they can't strike back, giving him a precious window of safety. He keeps landing leg sweeps every time they try to get back on their feet. Back in the arcade, this would be a total cheap move, but here, it's the perfect lockdown. Watching from her throne, the queen looks pretty impressed by how well the simple loop is working. The other prisoners start cheering him on, sensing that the tide has finally turned. Nizuna just watches in silence, her eyes wide as she tries to process what she's seeing. Noticing their hesitation, he realizes the guards are completely thrown off by his basic movements. Since their game knowledge is even worse than a beginner's, he figures he has this fight in the bag. He leans into a massive strike, putting his whole weight behind the blow. A huge shockwave follows the hit as he keeps the pressure on. Yumishio grits his teeth in total confusion, wondering what just happened. The impact felt real, yet there wasn't a soul close enough to actually touch him. Breathless and covered in sweat, he tries to steady himself while looking down the hall. The Knight Commander just stands there with a confident smirk, pointing a single finger forward to show he is the one in control. He pulls his hand back, winding up for a move. With a sharp snap, he flicks his fingers forward. It's a tiny gesture, but it clearly packs a punch. Suddenly, a barrage of invisible strikes hits Yumishio like heavy stones. He manages to get his guard up, but the force is still enough to shove him backward. He's stuck on the defensive, unable to find a way to close the gap. Bracing against the pressure, Kyle finally understands what he's up against. The commander is clearly a classic zoner, using long-range projectiles to keep him stuck at a distance. Just like the arcade characters who spam fireballs, these fighters win by making sure you never get close enough to land a punch. Looking at the smirk on the man nearby, it's clear the commander isn't the only one using these distance tactics. Thinking back, Kyle remembers the legends of his old world, specifically the great Daigo Yumihara. He's a legend for mastering the exact same projectile style the commander is using right now. Mastering those characters means understanding the absolute basics of how these games work. It's a huge mountain of knowledge to climb, and it usually leaves beginners feeling pretty defeated. Still, once you finally get it, you're on the path to becoming a top-tier pro. Gazing at his opponent, Kyle wonders if the commander is just naturally talented or if he's truly elite. He knows he's at a massive disadvantage right now, since he doesn't even know his own character archetype, like if he's a rushdown fighter or a grappler. He's basically flying blind. Looking stressed, he wonders if he even has a special move or how he'd even trigger one. The Demon Queen watches from her throne, admitting she's disappointed since she actually had high hopes for him. Just as he turns to leave, she calls out for him to wait. Leaning forward with a sudden spark of interest, she asks for his name. He pauses, looking back with a bruised face to tell her his name is Yumishio. Still sizing him up, she admits he's actually pretty strong. Then she breaks into a wide, toothy grin, laughing that she has a real weakness for strong guys. She tells the commander to stand down and forgive him, and Rakudo quickly bows, accepting her word as law. Addressing him as Kyle, she adds that she expects big things and wants him to represent her kingdom well. He just gives a shaky nod, Still looking a bit pale from the confrontation, he heads straight for Mitsushima, feeling lucky they're both still in one piece. He calls her Shindo and tells her it's finally time to get moving. Behind them, the Demon Queen keeps her eyes on him, curious about what he's up to. Kyle pulls Shindo close as the Queen asks who said the girl was allowed to leave. 2. She admits she only overlooked his rudeness because she has a thing for strong people. Looking back at the trembling girl, she points out that Shindo is clearly the opposite. The Queen's expression turns cold as she admits she really hates weaklings. On her command, the guards drag Shindo back toward the block to finish what they started. Kyle snaps, yelling at them to keep their hands off her. Before he can react, one of the elves draws a sword and warns him to stay in his lane. They shove the girl onto the platform, sneering that she'd better scream even louder this time. Watching her struggle, he realizes a head-on fight is just a death sentence for both of them. As she begs him to save her, he forces himself to stop and find a different way to play this. He calls out to the Queen, telling her he has a proposal. Seemingly amused by his nerve, she tells him to go ahead and speak his mind. Reminding her of her own words, he points out how she hates weaklings and only respects the strong. Then he drops the bait, asking if she would enjoy watching a total weakling transform into a powerhouse right before her eyes. He asks for just 1 week, promising to make her even stronger than the commander. Hearing this, the Queen bursts out laughing and reminds him that Isekai'd is the top fighter in the whole kingdom. Grinning through the sweat, he insists he can make it happen if he just has those 7 days. Her eyes narrow as she asks what he's willing to do if he fails to deliver. He grips his tie, ready to put his own life on the line. He goes all in, telling the Queen he'll serve as her slave for the rest of his life if the training fails. He looks completely serious, sweat dripping down his face as he makes the pledge. Looking on in shock, Shindo watches as he throws his entire future away just to save her. The Queen finds the whole thing hilarious, laughing as she asks if he's that confident or just a weirdo who wants to be her dog. Still chuckling, she calls him a strange man but officially accepts the gamble. He's finally bought them some time, even if the price is his entire future. The Demon Queen claps her hands, grinning like she just found a brand new toy. Finding the idea interesting, she tells him she'd love to see him actually pull it off. Kyle lets out a long, shaky breath, feeling his heart finally slow down. He thanks her and asks if this means she'll let Shindo go. Just then, she stops him and says he has one thing mixed up. She admits that while she likes strength, there's actually something else she loves even more. She leans in with a twisted grin, admitting her real passion is humiliating and breaking the weak. As she tells him to get started, he just grits his teeth in silent horror. He finally realizes exactly what kind of monster he's dealing with. She doesn't even wait for the training to start, letting her guards drive a red-hot blade right into Shindo's stomach. She lets out a scream that fills the room while Kyle desperately tells them to stop. He can only roar in frustration, his own face contorted as he watches. Shindo's eyes roll back from the shock, her mouth hanging open in a silent plea for it to end. Nearby, the schoolgirls stand frozen, their faces pale as they witness the brutality. He eventually looks away, gritting his teeth in a blind rage and cursing how powerless he is. Shindo lies there shackled and broken, a fresh, smoking brand now seared into her stomach. She can barely keep her eyes open while the guards stand over her, treating her like she's already lost everything. The Demon Queen watches the whole thing and laughs, saying it's the best thing she's ever seen. Satisfied, she walks away from her throne and tells the guards to handle the rest. Hunched over on the floor, Kyle mutters a curse and calls her a brat under his breath. His despair quickly turns into a burning rage. Gritting his teeth, he stares ahead and vows that he will never forgive the king of Bijin for this. Later that night, he settles into the beginner fighter dorms to process everything. Standing by a window in his cramped room, he stays quiet as he looks out into the dark. Mitsushima is lying on a bed nearby, her breathing heavy and labored after the day's torture. Watching her, he tells himself that staying like this isn't an option. He sits by a small lantern, deciding his goal is to become the absolute strongest person in this fighting game world. Looking around the quiet dorm room, he realizes that just wanting strength isn't going to be enough. If he's going to stop Mitsushima from being hurt again, he knows he has to reach the top at record speed. To make that happen, he starts mapping out everything he knows about his enemies and his own abilities. He puts pen to paper, writing new strategy note across the very first page. It's a fresh start, meant to break down the world's rules until he finds a way to win. Looking at the blank pages, he realizes this notebook is going to be his lifeline. Since he has no idea who his real enemies are, he figures he has to keep the whole thing a secret. Late that night, a sudden knock at the door catches him off guard while he's still working. He wonders who could be visiting at this hour, but he stands up and cautiously answers. At the door, a mysterious visitor apologizes for the time, admitting they had no one else to turn to for help. He opens the door and finds the 3 schoolgirls standing there in the moonlight. Despite looking worn out, there is a serious fire in their eyes. The girl in the middle gets straight to the point, asking him to teach them how to fight in this other world. It seems they've realized that, without his help, they won't last long here. Standing outside in the dark, the 3 of them bow low and plead for him to teach them how to fight. Kyle looks caught off guard, asking why they would even come to him for this. The girl in front doesn't blink, explaining that he's strong and actually seems like someone they can trust. She reminds him how he took down that massive fighter and even promised the queen he could train someone in a single week. Since he's that confident, they figure he's their best shot at staying alive in this place. But Kyle shuts them down immediately with a flat refusal. He rubs the back of his neck, looking totally drained by the whole situation. As the girls stand there in shock, he asks what made them think he'd ever bother helping them in the first place. One of them looks toward the bed, reminding him how desperately he fought to keep the sleeping girl safe. Because he went that far for her, she's convinced he's actually a kind person who can't just ignore someone in trouble. He takes a second to process that before simply saying he sees her point. Then, Kyle cracks a dark, jagged smile and tells them they couldn't be more wrong. He insists he's actually a cold-blooded guy who doesn't care about anyone else. Motioning to the sleeping girl, he explains Nezuna was only an exception because she's special to him. One of the schoolgirls stares back in shock, her eyes welling up as she realizes he sees them as disposable. Looking desperate, another girl asks if he even knows what happens to women who can't fight in a place like this. Kyle remains unmoved, leaning against the door while telling the girls he just isn't interested in their problems. One of them snaps back, calling him no better than any other man in this world before telling the others it's time to go. They walk away defeated, their shadows stretching down the long, empty hallway. Without another word, he pulls the door shut and retreats into the silence of his room. Later on, Nezuna sits on her bed with a hollow look in her eyes, clearly feeling the weight of their situation. Shrugging off the guilt, he looks over at the girl still sleeping nearby and reminds himself that being the bad guy is the only way to keep them safe. Looking grim, he points out that in a place like this, you can't trust anyone because you never know who will turn into an enemy. She doesn't back down, arguing that the girls are harmless and teaching them a little about fighting wouldn't hurt. Addressing her directly, he asks what she thinks is the single most important thing for getting stronger in this world. She hesitates for a second before guessing that it has to be physical stats, like raw strength or quick reflexes. Kyle shuts that idea down immediately and tells her the real key is knowledge. Glancing at his notebook, he explains that in this game-like world, having more info than your opponent is the same as being stronger. Without knowing the mechanics, a fighter just gets overwhelmed by moves they aren't prepared to handle. While the girls take this in, he admits that teaching these secrets to outsiders would turn them into dangerous weapons. He adds that these fighting games are really just a battle of information. Hearing this, she wonders if she could actually learn those secrets herself. Even though the queen shot down his original proposal, he's determined to keep his word to her over time. Looking across the small room, he tells her plainly that he wants her to become stronger than anyone else. He admits that training her is the only way he can truly atone for his actions. She just stares back in silence, her eyes wide as she repeats the words to herself. By the next morning, the weight of Kyle's promise hits home as they reach a massive beginner-only arena called the Iron Gate. An elven guard stands at the entrance, barking orders for all the new recruits to gather around and pay attention. Pointing toward a wooden crate, he tells the group they have to swap their current clothes for standard fighter gear. Kyle and the other men wait in silence, looking serious about the ordeal ahead. The girls are then herded off to a separate section to get changed for their own debut. While the girls go one way, the other fighters nearby busy tightening their gear and bracing for the arena. Kyle finished putting on his own uniform, looking focused as he tests the fit of his fingerless gloves. In the background, a few rough-looking guys start whispering and laughing while they watch him from a distance. Hearing a sudden shout of surprise, he looks over his shoulder and wonders what could possibly be causing such a stir. The commotion is coming from the girls, who have just finished changing into their official arena gear. It turns out the uniform is nothing more than high-cut leotards and gloves, leaving them looking more like showgirls than actual fighters. Nazuna stands there trembling with embarrassment while her friend snaps at the onlookers to quit staring. Gripping the edge of the skimpy fabric, she wonders what kind of place would even make them wear something this ridiculous. An elven guard calls for quiet, announcing that the vice commander is about to explain the rules for the Iron Gate. Kyle watches intently, figuring anyone who ignores these instructions won't last long. A woman steps forward and holds up two small tokens, telling the group they each get a pair of these credit coins. These represent their livelihood, with a single coin covering exactly 1 week of food and shelter. Realizing the stakes, a nearby fighter points out they only have 2 weeks before they're completely out of time. The vice commander confirms this, shouting that they better start stealing credits from each other before their clock runs out. Pointing at the crowd, she explains the only way to get more is to win a duel against someone else. When 2 fighters agree to a match, the winner walks away with one of the loser's coins. Kyle looks over the group, realizing their entire lives are currently worth just 2 credits. Still, he finds the whole ruthless setup pretty interesting since it reminds him of his past in the arcades. Thinking back, he remembers how he used to spend all his time in those old, smoke-filled game centers. He would clutch a couple of coins he saved by skipping out on drinks, knowing his budget was always tight. Even though losing twice meant his night was over, the thrill of staying on a winning streak kept him coming back. The stakes are way higher here, though, since losing those to starting credits means actually dying. As he tightens his glove, he figures the same kind of beginner hunters from the arcades are bound to show up soon. Right on cue, a scruffy guy with a greasy smile slaps a hand on Kyle's shoulder and asks for a match. He tries to play it cool, saying he's a rookie too, but Kyle sees right through the fake friendly vibe. These guys have no pride and don't care about getting stronger. They just want to snatch up credits from people who don't know any better. Staring him down, he figures that since this is basically a fighting game, the one with the most information is going to win. He notices a massive gap between a total rookie and someone who's been around the block. In a real arcade, someone could just jump in and challenge you, but here he realizes a match won't start unless he says yes. The hunter stands there waiting for a bite. Kyle thus gives a dismissive wave and tells the guy he isn't interested. He knows that if they just ignore these cheap taunts, they can spend their first week training to bridge that skill gap. But that plan falls apart the second these hunters realize how defenseless the girls look in their arena gear. A group of them quickly closes in, surrounding the girls with predatory smiles. Watching from the side, Kyle realizes this kind of harassment was bound to happen eventually. When they get a bit too close, Miku finally snaps and tells them to stay away. Instead of listening, the thugs just keep shuffling forward. The scruffy hunter reaches out and grabs Keiko right in front of everyone, giving a fake apology about his hand slipping. Hearing her name yelled out, the rest of the girls scream in shock. Keiko stares him down with her teeth bared, looking like she's ready to explode. He just gives her a greasy smirk and says if she has a problem, They should settle it with a match. Watching the scene unfold, Kyle warns them to endure it because this provocation is exactly how these guys operate. Despite the warning, Miku has clearly reached her breaking point, quietly telling the hunter she understands. She snaps, holding up a credit coin and declaring that she is going to fight him. Hearing exactly what he wanted, the scruffy hunter grins and confirms that the match is officially on. Kyle thus watches in total frustration, calling her an idiot for not being able to hold back. While Kyle fumes, Kyoko calls out in a panic, but Miku just tells her not to sweat it. She brings her hand up, shifting into a sharp, focused martial arts pose. Looking like a completely different person, she admits she spent years practicing karate back in her old life. The dust settles around her as she locks in, ready to show the hunter exactly what she can do. But instead of landing a blow, she ends up flat on her back, staring at the sky in shock. She lost. It stings because she really believed her karate background would let her hold her own, even against a man. The hunter doesn't care, flashing a creepy grin as he scoops up her hard-earned coin. Kyle watches from the side, knowing that reading an opponent's first move is usually the whole game. But the second it started, the hunter did something Miku never saw in a dojo, leaving her completely frozen. The hunter just launches himself into the air instead of closing the distance on the ground. Caught completely off guard, Miku just watches him fly toward her because in the real world, nobody actually fights like that. Before she can even raise her guard, he slams a brutal strike right into her neck, ending the match in a single blow. Kyoko tries to keep her head in the game, swearing she won't let her guard down like the others. As the hunter leaps into the air again, she stands frozen, unable to track his weird movement. It makes no sense to her. He's just repeating the same basic jump, yet she can't find an opening to strike. Suddenly, his boot slams right into her face with enough force to spin her around and drop her hard. Her friends rush to her side while she sinks into despair, feeling like they're just easy prey for these guys. Watching from the sidelines, the hunters just laugh, clearly enjoying how easy it is to pick them apart. From that day on, their lives turn into a complete nightmare. Seeing how weak the group is, the local men start targeting them even more aggressively. They're forced to work as servers, constantly surrounded by guys who just want to provoke them. Kyoko is pushed to her limit, crying in silence. She struggles through the back-breaking labor. It's a painful, exhausting situation that feels like it has no escape. Still, the absolute hardest part for her, the realization that nobody is coming to help them. Kyle watches from the shadows as the situation gets worse every single day. It's the kind of crowd he hates, most guys who act tough and mock the losers without ever stepping into the ring themselves. Seeing Kyoko get humiliated again, he knows he could easily teach her how to handle these low-level hunters. Still, he tells himself this world is a cruel game of survival, and he's lucky just to be breathing. He thinks back to his days at the arcade, remembering how he reached the top of the gaming world by relying only on himself. Time eventually passes until the day Kyoko finally loses every last coin she has left. With her last coin gone, the hunter grips her head and mockingly asks what she plans to do now. Standing over her in the middle of the room, he just keeps laughing while the rest of the group watches her humiliation. He asks if she's up for a rematch, or if one of her friends is brave enough to step in and fight him instead. None of them can even find the words to respond, just standing there trembling as they stare at the floor. The hunters erupt into laughter, mocking the group and asking if they're really friends or just the lowest of the low for staying silent. Watching from the shadows, Kyle tells himself that their choice to back down is actually correct. He figures that in this world, putting yourself first is just how things have to be. The scruffy hunter turns his attention back to Kyoko, offering her a few coins if she grants a special request of his. Tilting her head up, he tells her to come to his room later, promising that he's a lot gentler in bed than he is in a fight. Kyoko just freezes, looking sick as he makes the demand. She stands there paralyzed while he makes it clear exactly what he wants in exchange for those coins. Looking dark, Kyle wonders if he should just let this happen too. He tries to convince himself that as long as they aren't being killed, it's probably a necessary evil he should just accept. Just as things look hopeless, Miku shouts for the hunter to wait. She steps forward and offers to go to his room herself, while Kyoko and the others just stare, unable to say a word. Admitting she's not strong enough to win a fight, she says she refuses to abandon her friend. She clenches her teeth, explaining they've been together since they were kids and she'd do whatever it takes. Looking at her, Kyle seems surprised by the depth of her loyalty. He just bursts out laughing, calling their friendship beautiful in the most sarcastic way possible. Leaning in with a nasty grin, he tells them that in this world, having friends is completely useless. Kyle watches them with a heavy expression, wondering if a bond that strong can actually exist. Seeing them together makes him think back to his old life, back when he turned down a simple invitation to hang out at the arcade. Miku looks up, her face full of worrying for her friend. The hunter ruins the moment by accepting the deal, saying he'll gladly take both of them on. Before he can take another step, Kyle speaks up and asks if they can talk for a second. Flashing a confident smirk, he looks the hunter right in the eye and asks for a match. Kyoko watches him in disbelief, wondering why this random middle-aged guy is suddenly sticking his neck out. The hunter just stares back, clearly unimpressed by the scruffy stranger standing in front of him. Looking closer, he notices Kyle only has a single beginner coin to his name. He lets out a mock laugh, asking if a total newbie is really trying to act tough. Kyle doesn't even flinch, instead upping the stakes by offering to hand over 2 coins if he loses. The hunter stares at him like he's a complete moron, happily laughing that the match is officially on. When the girls call out to him in shock, he just turns his back on them. He tells them straight up that he isn't doing this as a favor. It's just the path he's choosing to get stronger. They move to an open area, getting ready to start the lopsided duel. He stands ready as the hunter faces him down, while the girls watch from the sidelines, looking pretty anxious. Sizing up his opponent, he figures these types of bullies always rely on the same 3 basic tactics to win. He knows exactly what's coming. The first is a simple throw, use of force away through a solid defense. After that is the leg sweep, meant to stop someone from moving altogether. The third and final trick is the jump. Kyle notes it's a basic move that usually ruins beginners who don't know any better. Without wasting a second, the hunter leaps into the air and yells that he's coming. Kyle stays rooted to the spot, just watching the guy fly. Kyoko cries out in a panic, recognizing the same move that took her down and begging him to block. But blocking is exactly what the hunter wants, since a jump attack leaves the defender wide open for a follow-up. Instead of playing defense, he tenses his fist, knowing he has to hit the guy before his feet even touch the ground. He drives a heavy uppercut straight into the guy's chin, timing it perfectly for the split second he's vulnerable. The impact is huge, sending the hunter flying backward before he even gets a chance to land. He hits the dirt hard as Kyle calls him a grasshopper, which is just slang for a player who keeps jumping around like an idiot. The girls just watch from the sidelines in silence, unable to even process what they're looking at. It turns out he didn't just punch from the ground. He actually jumped up to intercept the hunter midair. Looking down with a bored expression, Kyle tells him that these reckless attacks are useless against someone who understands anti-air logic. The hunter manages to scramble back to his feet, looking visibly rattled. Gritting his teeth, he screams that Kyle shouldn't get cocky just because he landed one lucky hit. He doesn't even get a chance to back up those words before he's flat on his back, bleeding and completely out cold. Kyoko just stares in disbelief, whispering about how he easily crushed an opponent she couldn't even touch. But he isn't looking for a hero's welcome. He just flashes a grin and holds up the coin he earned for winning. Looking up at him, she offers a quiet thank you, figuring he actually fought for her sake. He quickly clarifies that he never actually said he was giving the coin to her. Confused, she just stares back at him, unsure what to make of the sudden change in tone. Holding the coin out, he says he is willing to hand it over on one condition: she has to fulfill a wish for him. The girls freeze with suspicious looks, worried he might be just as bad as the hunter they just escaped. Still, he ignores the awkward silence and prepares to tell them exactly what he wants. Without skipping a beat, he asks her to become his sparring partner. Caught off guard, she wonders what that even means in a world like this. He explains that top-tier fighting isn't a solo sport anymore. In his world, people share data and use coaches to stay ahead. While the girls listen in silence, he keeps going. Thinking back to his past, he mentions a rival who traveled the world just to stay sharp. He figures a partner is the only way to keep his own skills from getting rusty. He adds that if she really wants to grow strong, she needs someone she can actually trust by her side. Surprised by the offer, she wonders if he really thinks she fits the bill. He warns her she's currently way too weak to be useful, so he's going to put her through a brutal crash course. That's all it takes for her to buckle down. She shouts her agreement and officially calls him master with total fire in her eyes. While Kyle starts his new teaching gig, the scene shifts deep inside the throne room of Pigeon Castle. Isekai'd asks if any legendary fighting gamers have turned up yet, figuring their technical skills give them a huge advantage here. Addressing the former king, Isekai'd, she mentions that a guy named Kyle might actually be the real deal. Alec listens with a stern look, reminding her that it's her job to pick the kingdom's champions now. Still, she stays confident, knowing they have the strongest warrior, Commander Rikudo, as their ultimate backup. Alec warns that this exact pride is what makes things dangerous. He explains that a rival kingdom to the west has successfully summoned their own pro gamer. Taken aback, Keela asks if it was really a direct summons instead of a reincarnation. Her father nods, adding that this player even chose to come over on their own. Finally, he reveals the real kicker. The newcomer is calling themselves one of the legendary 5 fighting game gods. The scruffy hunter is rattled, wondering how she suddenly got so good. Staying focused, she looks like a totally different person compared to their last encounter. Out of options, the guy decides to go for broke with one last desperate move. As he leaps into the air, she realizes his mistake immediately. She catches him with a heavy uppercut, shouting that jump attacks don't work on her anymore. The hit sends her opponent face down into the dirt, and Kyoko throws her hands up in celebration while her friends cheer from the sidelines. Kyle watches with a satisfied smile, noticing that she applied every bit of his training perfectly. It's a massive turnaround from her total defeat just a week ago, and even though she's covered in bruises, she's the only one left standing. She looks up at him with a hopeful face, asking if she has finally gotten stronger. Instead of a straight answer, Kyle gestures toward the crowd and tells her she can see the results for herself. Every fighter nearby is staring in disbelief, wondering what kind of secret magic she used to become this powerful. He tries to keep things professional, reminding her to stop calling him master because they are strictly sparring partners. Beaming with pride, she laughs off the request and sticks with the title anyway, while Kyle quietly notes that he really only taught her to very basic things. Flashing back to 3 days earlier, he stands before the group and tells them he's only going to teach them 2 things. She stares at him in disbelief, wondering if such a short list could actually lead to a win. Assuring them it's more than enough, he claims these basics will work against almost anyone at their rank. The first lesson is something every gamer knows by heart, the anti-air. Since it's easier to show than explain, he figures it's time for a live demonstration. He asks Kyoko to try jumping toward him, and she tentatively agrees to give it a shot. She takes a massive leap, soaring right over his head. Looking down, she's actually shocked at how high she's gotten, but before she can even land, he strikes her down. He explains that being in the air is a massive weakness because people in this world don't know how to guard while jumping. After knocking her back, he calls this the anti-air and tells her to always look for that opening. Then he asks what she thinks an opponent will do once they realize jumping is too dangerous. She thinks about it for a second before guessing they'll probably just walk toward her. Kyle nods, explaining that since most people here don't have special movement skills, they only have 2 options to close the gap, jumping or walking. Noticing Keiko's sharp reaction, he gives her a small compliment for picking up on the logic so quickly. Holding up the fingers, he explains that the second lesson is all about learning how to stop an opponent who's coming in on foot. To start the drill, he tells Kyoko to approach him, which leaves her a bit flustered as she asks him to drop the formal titles when they talk. Agreeing to the request, he has her start walking forward so they can begin the next phase of training. As soon as she takes a step, Kyle catches her with a quick leg sweep that sends her straight to the dirt. According to him, a low kick is the perfect way to drop anyone trying to close the distance. He adds that at their current rank, no one will have the skill to even try a counterattack. Moving forward in this world means you can't block, leaving the legs as a wide open target. The girls just blink, trying to wrap their heads around the fact that such a basic rule could change everything. Keiko asks if this means a fighter is basically a sitting duck whenever they jump or step forward. He gives her a confident grin, telling her she's hit the nail on the head. Hearing that, the rest of the group gets hyped, impressed by how quickly she's catching on. For the next 3 days, he makes her drill those to specific counters until they become second nature. It's a grind, but perfecting her skills is the best way to move his own plans forward. Watching her move, he realizes another classic mechanic exists here, the cross-up attack. That training pays off instantly when Kyoko finally pulls off her revenge match. Miku wins her debut right after, using her long legs and natural flexibility to dominate the fight. Everything goes exactly how Kyle planned, and the two girls become the talk of the arena as they rack up a winning streak. They're practically celebrities at this point, but there's still one person left to worry about. Kyle is thinking specifically about Keiko. Her first match is tomorrow, and he wonders if someone so shy can actually handle the pressure of the arena. Sitting at his desk, he lets out a heavy sigh while trying to figure out a plan. Kyoko eventually breaks the silence, noticing that he's been acting pretty stressed lately. Turning toward her, he asks if it is really that obvious. She reminds him how he used to claim he'd never take students, back when he only cared about his own strength. Kyoko leans in close, teasingly pointing out that his head is actually filled with thoughts about his new students these days. Flustered, he insists it's only because he's focused on the strategy of the tournament. She keeps the jokes coming, warning him not to go after girls who are still high school age. When he reminds her he's 43, she just tells him to stick to women in their 20s. Putting the humor aside, she brings up Keiko's debut match tomorrow and admits he should call it off if there's zero hope of winning. Instead of stopping her, though, she asks him to just trust in her potential and keep an eye on her. She looks away for a moment, admitting she really wishes someone had done the same for her back then. The next day rolls around and Keiko finally steps into the arena, looking tiny compared to her massive opponent. Standing on the sidelines, Kyoko and the girls scream at the top of their lungs to cheer her on. While the crowd mocks the big guy for having to fight a shrimp, he just looks annoyed by the pressure. He lunges forward with a heavy swing, shouting that he knows exactly what's at stake. Instead of backing off, Keiko drops low and catches him with a clean leg sweep that nearly knocks him off his feet. She stays aggressive, following up immediately before he can even think about finding his footing. With a sudden burst of speed, she slams a strike into his chest that sends him reeling back through the dirt. Kyle watches closely from the side, relieved to see her executing the anti-airs and sweeps exactly like they practiced. Still, the big guy ain't ready to quit, glaring at her and telling her not to get too confident just yet. He suddenly drops into a defensive crouch, catching Kyle off guard. Watching from the sidelines, he realizes the big guy is finally starting to think instead of just mindlessly rushing in. This shift is what he considers a real counter strategy. Back in the old arcade days, he learned that every perfect tactic eventually gets cracked once an opponent has enough time to study it. Keiko stays perfectly still and waits for him to move first. Since they don't know if there's a match timer, she's happy to let him sweat until he tries something desperate. Instead of attacking, the big guy huddles down into a full crouching guard, creating a wall that blocks almost every ground strike. Watching from the sidelines, Kyle realizes this stance has one major weakness that he never got around to teaching her. Just as things start to stall, she suddenly launches herself into the air, catching her opponent completely off guard. Kyle's jaw drops as he watches her come down with a heavy jump attack, realizing she figured out how to break his defense all on her own. She slams into him with a heavy overhead strike, rattling the giant's skull. Kyle watches intensely, noting that an aerial move was the correct answer to that low block. As they reset for a split second, she's clearly the one in control of the pace. He shouts her name, reminding her that raw size doesn't matter as long as she has a strategy. Hearing his support, she lets out a sharp shout and prepares to pour on the pressure. Her opponent just stares up in disbelief, his eyes wide as he realizes he's completely outmatched. Keiko hoists his massive frame high into the air, her legs trembling under the weight as he dangles helplessly upside down. This is the technical grappler strength Kyle promised would change everything, and it has the giant completely airborne. Dazed and sweating, the big man mutters that this has to be a lie. She ignores the strain and lets out a defiant yell, ready to slam him down and end this match once and for all. With a massive crash, she drives him straight into the dirt, finishing the fight in one heavy impact. Kyle and the girls go wild in the stands, shouting as the realization hits them. Gasping for air, she just stands there with her eyes wide in shock. She stares down at her defeated opponent, whispering to herself that she actually won. As he watches her celebrate, he realizes she must have picked up on how he handles defensive players during their practice sessions. The other girls swarm her with hugs, but he's still thinking about that last move. It wasn't just a simple throw, she actually took his advice and improved it on the fly. Smiling to himself, he admits she really did an amazing job today. He stands back while they cheer, thinking he probably owes Nazuna an apology for being so intense during their training. Looking a bit flustered, he barely has time to react before the winner turns toward him. Keiko gives him a massive, beaming smile and asks to be called Keiko-chan from now on, officially calling him master. He figures it must be his age talking, but seeing her grow like this makes him feel pretty good. Far away from the cheering arena, inside the tall walls of Pigeon Castle, the mood is much colder. The queen sits on her throne as she gets word that Kyle's group is already moving up to the bronze rank. While she admits their progress is interesting, seeing them act like a happy little family just bores her. Her advisor tells her not to worry since the next round of preliminaries is starting soon. With a sharp grin, the queen mentions she's already thinking of a way to tear that master-disciple bond apart during the big event. Kyle watches the girls celebrate with a quiet smile, realizing he genuinely enjoys seeing them grow. Stepping forward, he tells the group they all need to get stronger to survive this new world, and they shout back their agreement in unison. Just then, he catches a glimpse of someone watching them from the shadows. It's a dark-haired woman, staring at him with a look of deep, quiet sadness. By the next morning, that mysterious woman is nowhere to be found, and Kyle gathers the girls to announce that their real training starts today. Before he says a word of theory, though, he makes them promise to keep every single lesson a total secret. Warning them of the stakes, he explains that this knowledge is heavy, it could create unstoppable monsters if it ever fell into the wrong hands. Nazuna just stares back at him, clearly feeling the weight of that word. Holding out his hand, he asks if they can really give him their word on this. They don't hesitate for a second, looking back at him with nothing but determination. Since they're all in, he's finally ready to explain the core secret behind it all. Kyle looks them in the eye and tells them the big secret is special moves. The girls look puzzled, wondering if he means some kind of guaranteed killing technique. Shaking his head, he explains that the shockwave Commander Likud used earlier was a perfect example. When they ask if they can learn to pull off moves like that too, he just gives them a confident yes. Nazuna's eyes light up with pure excitement as she begs him to teach her. Even though he's a bit surprised, she's the one most hooked on his gamer terms. He takes a steady step forward, preparing to reveal the logic behind those powerful techniques. Still, he tells them to hold on, explaining he needs to check something first. He looks at the group and asks what their hobbies are. The girls just stand there in a daze, wondering why their personal interests would matter in a fight. They all look pretty weirded out by the question, with one of them even calling him a total creep for prying into their private business. Keeping his cool, he tells them he has a perfectly good reason for asking. He explains that in this world, a fighter's special techniques are actually powered by their deepest hobbies and obsessions. Nezuna starts to get the idea and mentions that for her, that obsession is definitely karate. Following her lead, Keiko admits she's really into retro games because her dad has a huge collection back home. Kyle turns to Kyoko and asks what her hobby is, making her look a bit embarrassed. Fidgeting, she admits she loves watching pro wrestling. A vision of a massive suplex flashes behind her, which makes perfect sense to him. This confirms his theory that special moves are tied to individual tastes. He tells the group he'll keep those interests in mind while showing them how to move. By mixing their passions with his training, he figures they'll eventually find a technique that would normally be impossible. The hunt for their special moves officially kicks off right then and there. Starting with the basics, he has them practice simple things like crouching and standing at different rhythms. While Nezuna tests out strings of rapid-fire strikes, everyone keeps pushing to find their own flow. Suddenly, a voice rings out claiming they've finally done it. He freezes in surprise, realizing the first person to unlock a technique was someone he never would have guessed. It's Kyoko, and she stands there with a cocky grin, shouting that she finally did it. Skeptical, he tells her to prove it by attacking him right now. When she hesitates, he insists that she doesn't hold back, figuring he can handle the impact. She takes him up on the offer immediately, winding up a massive strike while shouting the start of a super move. She lets the strike rip, sending a sharp wave of energy cutting straight through the air. Getting his guard up just in time, he braces for an impact that's way stronger than he expected. Gritting his teeth, he realizes this wasn't just a physical swing. She actually launched a projectile. That confirms it for him. Her love for wrestling really did manifest into a literal special move. She's beaming, flashing a victory sign while bragging about her new super slash. Seeing the display, the other girls crowd around and beg to know how she pulled it off. Kyle just watches them, realizing she has officially become a projectile spamming character. After the excitement dies down, he calls an end to the session and tells them to keep practicing solo. Night soon settles over the castle, bringing a rare bit of quiet to the grounds. Later on, he sits at his desk and starts writing his notes, certain he just figured out the secret to this world. He thinks about how a modern gamer might laugh at him for getting this worked up over one measly technique. But seeing Kyoko's genuine smile makes the whole thing feel real. This entire experience reminds him of his days spent in Japanese arcades. Back then, there weren't any online guides, just a basic tutorial and a small list of moves on the machine. You just had to pour your pocket money into the slot and learn as you went. Back then, every little discovery or win felt like it actually mattered. Looking back, Kyle realizes this whole world is just like being dropped in front of a brand new arcade cabinet. It's a mystery game he has to figure out from the ground up. Even if the situation feels unfair, using his experience to solve it step by step gives him a genuine rush. This feeling only makes him more determined to master it all. He settles into bed, looking over at the three of them and realizing he owes everything to their presence. As he stares at the ceiling, he can't help but feel lucky to have them by his side. Nearby, one of them is tucked in and snoring away. The next morning finds him already back on his feet, ready to kick off another day of intense training. Waiting for him at the training ground, the girls look incredibly stiff and awkward. He stops in his tracks, asking if something bad happened to put them in such a mood. Instead of answering, Kyoko huffs and says they're the ones who want to know what's going on. Suddenly, their eyes go wide as they point frantically toward his back, screaming for him to look behind him. Confused by the sudden panic, he starts to turn around to see what's lurking in his shadow. Standing right behind him is Nezuna, looking completely unbothered with her hands on her hips. She gives him a sharp, confident smirk as if she's been waiting for him to finally notice her. He stammers her name in shock, reminding her she's still supposed to be resting and recovering. Turning the tables, she admits she got tired of waiting for him to start her training, so she decided to take the initiative. Leaning in close, she teases that she needs to be there to prevent any mistakes between him and the younger girls. Since she's an adult, she figures it's her duty to step in as a guardian. This immediately sets the rest of the group off, and they start shouting about how weird her phrasing is. Looking back with a sly grin, she asks the girls if they've really never felt their hearts race around him even once. The question leaves them all in a stunned, awkward silence. That awkward silence is broken by a voice calling out from the shade of a nearby tree. A knight steps forward, noting how well Kyle seems to be getting along with his team. Recognizing the man, Kyle asks why a high-ranking commander would bother visiting such a low-rank zone. He wonders if it's about their recent winning streak or maybe a potential rank-up. The knight shakes his head, telling them they are all required to enter the national representative tournament, leaving Nazuna staring in shock. He explains that these qualifiers are for the upcoming World Combat Tournament, a massive event to choose the country's representatives. Kyle listens as the knight mentions a huge prize. The winner gets any wish granted by the king himself. Hearing this, Keio's eyes light up as she figures if their master wins, they could ask for anything. Still, the knight makes it clear this isn't optional, and failing comes with a heavy punishment for everyone involved. Raising a finger, he adds that there is one more unfortunate detail they need to know. He explains that the national preliminaries require everyone to enter in pairs of 2. His expression stays cold, showing zero room for negotiation. The group just stares at him as the math sinks in. With 5 of them total, one person is definitely getting left behind. He asks for clarification, wondering if the teams are strictly limited to pairs. Thinking back, he remembers how he initially had the disciples fight amongst themselves in small groups to test their skills. The commander cuts him off to explain this is a genuine 2-on-2-team battle he proposed to the king himself. As the group looks on, he reveals the official name of the format, the Waseda style. The girls just stare back blankly, having never heard the name before. Isekai'd breaks it down, explaining that each team member fights a separate one-on-one match. If one side sweeps both fights, they win the whole set immediately. When Miku asks about a tie, he clarifies that the winners of those first 2 matches have to fight each other in a final tiebreaker. Hearing the details makes the group go pale as they realize this format is a dangerous trap. Keiko points out that if just one person in the pair is incredibly strong, they can technically win everything themselves. Basically, if a match ends in a tie, the winners fight again, meaning one powerhouse can carry their teammate through the whole tournament. Kyle realizes the real problem here: whoever teams up with him is basically getting a free pass to the top, which puts a massive target on his back. The group stands there in a heavy silence as the reality of the situation sinks in. Knowing he doesn't have much of a choice, Kyle admits he'll have to choose his partner carefully now that the stakes are this high. Isekai'd leans in with a grin, asking which of the girls he's going to save and which one he's going to abandon. After dropping that bomb, he just turns and walks away, saying he said his piece. Still, Kyle doesn't say a word, just standing there with sweat on his face as the reality of the choice sinks in. Keiko finally breaks the tension, asking him directly who he intends to choose as his partner for the tournament. Looking on in silence, the rest of the group waits for an answer that could change everything for them. It isn't just about his choice. Either everyone is wondering how the 3 leftover members are even supposed to form a team. Kyle tells them he won't announce his partner until right before the tournament starts. Until that day comes, he promises to push everyone through the toughest training possible. Clenching his fist, he tells them their only job is to focus on their own growth. Miku looks down, asking him if they can really take his word for it. Still, Keiko points out that making them stronger doesn't help him if they all end up as rivals. Kyle doesn't pull any punches, telling them that if they really feel that way, they shouldn't bother showing up anymore. As the girl stays silent, He adds that he has zero interest in teaching anyone who doesn't want to be there. Then, he holds out his hand, promising that from tomorrow on, he's only going to focus on one thing. Staring her down, he tells her he's going to teach them exactly what they need to win. Closing his eyes, he lets the weight of that promise hang in the air while the girls just stare at his back in silence. Later that evening, the training grounds finally go quiet, but the looming choice of the tournament is still on everyone's mind. While the girls are washing up, Keiko breaks the quiet by asking the group what they're actually going to do. Kyoko just looks back at her, wondering what there is to even talk about anymore. She finally admits the whole conversation just comes down to whether they actually trust him. It's not a lack of faith. She's just trying to find the right words to explain it. Miku chimes in, pointing out they only got this strong because they followed his lead from the beginning. Turning her gaze toward Keiko, she asks if she feels the same way. Washing herself quietly, Miku says she is certain their master will lead them through to the very end. Keiko watches them in silence, realizing her friends believe in him with everything they've got. Still in the bath, Keiko asks Miku if she truly trusts him. Miku admits she doesn't think he's a bad person, but there's a heavy pause before she answers. Watching the steam, Keiko mentions that he reminds her of her own father. He's the type who would do anything to win, never pulling a single punch. Miku looks down, wondering if that drive goes even further. She figures that if it's for the sake of survival, he might be willing to do things they can't even imagine. Later that night, the scene shifts to their lodgings where Kyle catches Nazuna. He demands to know what she thinks she's doing, his voice sharp in the dark. She doesn't flinch, simply telling him the answer will be obvious once he sees it for himself. Looking her right in the eye, he repeats that he's asking because he doesn't have a clue what she's talking about. She leans over him in the dark, her face flushed as she reminds him of his promise never to abandon her. Looking back at her, he insists he hasn't forgotten a word of it. Still, she admits that words alone aren't enough to make her believe him anymore. She presses closer, suggesting that they need to connect on a much deeper level to be sure. With a look of heavy determination, she tells him that after tonight, there's no way he'll ever be able to forget she exists. He tells her not to push herself, but she softly insists she's doing just fine. Noticing her hands, he calls her out because she's clearly trembling as she grips him. She goes quiet and admits she can't help it, mentioning how she spent so long just waiting for him to finally save her. Finally breaking down, she asks him if he even realizes what kind of hell she had to survive before they met. He stays silent for a long moment, letting her words hang in the air. Eventually, he offers a quiet apology and asks her to just trust him. Pulling her into a tight hug, he promises he will never let anything bad happen to her. The next morning rolls around with a deceptively peaceful sky. Everything goes back to business as usual, with the group falling into their regular training routine. Still, the air feels heavy today. Miku and the others are focused, but they can't stop thinking about what's coming. They all know the deadline is here, and they're just waiting to see who he'll finally pick to fight by his side. He has a look on his face that says his mind is already made up. Watching them train, he keeps his gaze sharp and silent, more focused than he's ever been. Day after day, he's poured all his knowledge into the group to get them ready for the tournament. Still, as Miku throws her latest strike, she can't stop thinking about the very first thing he told them. Back then, he warned them about what was truly necessary to win, but she wouldn't understand those words until the very end. On the day of the qualifying tournament, the group gathers outside the massive arena gates as he prepares to announce the official pairs. Looking as cold as ever, Kyle explains his decision is final and says he won't hear any objections. The girls wait with bated breath as he starts to name the first team. Sweat beads on Miku's forehead while she waits to hear her name called. He pairs up Kyoko and Keiko first. They stand there with serious expressions, letting the announcement sink in. Quickly agreeing to do their best, they try to keep their spirits up. Even so, the tension is high because being the one left behind is the worst part of this selection. Moving on, he calls out Nazuna next, She steps forward with a sharp look, accepting her role. Miku watches the selection and feels her heart sink as she does the math. If the others are all accounted for, she's the only one left without a partner. Kyle calls Miku's name, pulling her out of her thoughts. Looking up, she watches her shadow stretch across the ground while the tension hits its peak. Nizuna shouts for him to wait, pointing out that if Miku is the last girl, he's the one left without a teammate. When Miku hears this, her eyes soften, wondering if he's sacrificing his own spot just so she can compete. Still, he shuts that idea down instantly. He says he is definitely entering the tournament and he already has a partner in mind. Right then, a massive man with white hair and a scarred face steps forward to stand beside him. Staring up in shock, Miku and the girls can't even figure out who this giant is. Whispers start breaking out among the crowd as people recognize him instantly. This is Beigo, the gladiator widely considered the strongest fighter in the entire gold rank. It finally clicks for Miku, and her expression goes completely blank as she realizes he chose raw power over their bond. He turns his back and starts walking away with Beigo, telling the girls he has one final lesson for them. It's the one thing they absolutely need if they actually want to win. He looks back with a sharp, almost cruel expression, explaining that the secret is to do exactly what the opponent hates most and you have to be thorough about it. Pausing for a second, he reminds them that in this world, victory requires a specific, cold-blooded mindset. Those words hang in the air while everyone stands around the arena grounds. Snapping at the cold logic, Kyoko lunges forward and grabs him by the collar. Behind her, the rest of the group watches on in stunned silence. She glares up at him with gritted teeth, demanding to know if every heretical lesson he ever gave them was just a lie. He looks her right in the eye and tells her to go find out for herself. As promised, he announces that their training is officially over, and from this point on, they're all playing for keeps in a fight for survival. Kyoko and Keiko stand there in silence, letting the weight of his words sink in. Turning his back to the group, he reminds them they aren't teammates anymore, they're rivals. He tells her that if she wants the truth, she has to go find it herself. Watching him walk away, Kyoko just stands there with her teeth gritted. When Keiko asks what they should do next, the silence hangs heavy between them. She starts thinking about his words, realizing there's no point in arguing anymore. To really know if she's gotten stronger, she has to step into that arena and see for herself. The massive doors of the Silver Gate tower over the entrance, marking the official start of the tournament qualifiers. Just past the threshold, the atmosphere is already pure chaos. Fighters are throwing down everywhere, trading heavy hits as they scramble to prove they belong in the bracket. One guy gets caught in a messy headlock as the scramble for the qualifiers turns into a street fight. Right next to him, another fighter is sent tumbling through the air, barely able to keep his guard up. Hearing a deep voice trash-talking the level of skill, one of the contestants looks back in surprise. Beigo steps into view looking completely unimpressed, mocking the group for not having anyone decent in their ranks. He laughs at their low rank, suggesting they should have probably tested themselves against bronze fighters first. Spreading his arms, Beigo asks if they seriously think they can take down a group of silver rankers. Still, he warns them the main tournament is mostly for gold ranks, so they won't even stand a chance later. Kyoko stays quiet, her expression hardening as she realizes how steep the climb is. When the silver gladiators close in, the girls find themselves standing before a literal wall of muscle. Keiko is intimidated though, telling her partner it's time to show what their training was actually for. While the chaos unfolds nearby, Beigo pulls Kyle aside and asks if he actually taught those girls a way to win. Kyle tries to brush him off as none of his business, but Beigo insists he needs to know what kind of person he's partnering with. Finally, Kyle admits that he did give them some pointers. Shrugging, he adds that what he taught them in those last few days was anything but standard. He stares ahead with a cold expression, calling it a heretical strategy. He explains that even real pro gamers have a tough choice to make when they teach beginners. One option is the slow and steady route, focusing on the basics and rules to build a solid foundation. While it's the honest way to play, it takes a massive amount of time to actually see results. Grinning, he contrasts that with the heretical way, which is built on the philosophy of winning right this second. He's talking about using moves that are almost impossible to handle the first time you see them. Kyoko shows exactly how it's done, catching her opponent with a high kick while he's still trying to figure out her stance. Meanwhile, Keiko pins her target down, ending the fight before the other guy can even think about a counter move. By forcing their own pace like this, the girls keep the pressure on until the match feels completely one-sided, because this method relies on the opponent not knowing what hit them. Some people call this style Vakuren Goroshi. It's exactly what the girls just pulled off, leaving the arena floor covered in the bodies of those silver rankers. Standing in the middle of the mess, they look calm despite being covered in blood. Those thugs didn't even have time to understand why they were losing before they were face down in the dirt. Beigo asks if winning through confusion like that is actually wrong. Looking down, Kyle says he wouldn't go so far as to call it evil. He explains that, with the tournament coming up so fast, this is really their only path to victory. Still, he admits he's basically corrupting them by letting beginners get their hands dirty with such a cheap strategy. As the girls walk toward the gate, he knows that once someone feels the thrill of an easy slaughter, they never really look at fighting the same way again. Kyoko looks down at the blood on her hands, her eyes wide as she processes the mess they just made. She stands there for a second, caught in a moment where she could still turn back. Instead of being horrified, a jagged smile spreads across her face as the rush of power finally takes over. Whispering to herself, she admits they've become incredibly strong, and she clearly has no intention of turning back. That resolve carries her all the way to the day of the Pigeon Kingdom qualifiers. This massive arena is the stage where everyone has to put their training to the test. Inside, the stands are packed to the brim. The roar of the crowd shakes the entire building as the event finally kicks off. High above the arena, a glowing elven woman addresses the massive crowd and welcomes the fighters brought here from other worlds. She announces that the qualifiers will be fought in pairs this time around. Listening closely, Kyoko and Kako stand ready to put their new technical skills to the test in this team format. The tournament follows a specific team bracket, where the winners of the whole thing will eventually face off against the previous champion. The Demon Queen looks down from her balcony, standing right next to Commander Rikudo. She announces that the winners of this tournament will eventually have to face him in a final match to decide the kingdom's representative. She keeps a perfectly calm expression, sounding almost bored as she addresses the crowd. Admitting it's nearly impossible to beat him, she calls Rikudo the strongest warrior she has ever recognized. To make things interesting, she promises to grant a single wish to anyone who can actually take him down no matter what they ask for. Up in the VIP boxes, some officials figure Rikudo will just breeze through the bracket again. Dismissing the idea, an older noble mentions he's actually putting his money on a different pair this year. As the arena floor opens up, the favorites finally step into the light. A massive guy named Gorai and his partner, Ryo. They're a legendary duo made of the previous runner-up and the strongest female warrior around. Realizing this powerhouse team is up for the very first fight, the old man can't wait for the opening bell. Kyle and Beigo step onto the arena floor as the official challengers for the opening round. Up in the stands, the spectators immediately recognize Beigo as a seasoned veteran who's put up great fights in the past. The old noble even thinks it's a waste of talent to see such a strong fighter used so early in the tournament. Looking at the partner, though, he's left scratching his head. He figures Kyle looks pretty average, noting that he isn't particularly young or physically impressive. The crowd spots the badge on his chest, realizing he's still in just a bottom-tier iron rank. Shouts of "get out" start echoing from the stands as people call him a total waste of space. Ignoring the noise, Beigo reminds him to stick to the plan, and Kyle just gives a quiet nod. Some of the more observant spectators realize the duo might be trying to let the big guy carry the whole team. When they finally face off against the favorites, The arena fills with boos from fans who think he's just a coward. Just as the referee prepares to start the fight, Bago suddenly raises his hand to stop the proceedings. He looks the official right in the eye and calmly announces that he is forfeiting the match. Stunned silence hits the stadium while the big man turns around and simply walks out of the ring. Kyle watches him leave with a smug grin, thinking about how everyone in the audience has the wrong idea. It turns out he isn't the one being carried. He's actually the one taking on the entire tournament alone. He points to himself and tells the crowd they've got it all wrong. He's the real fighter here. Up in the stands, the onlookers look pretty annoyed, wondering how a plain-looking guy like him expects to survive solo. As he stares down his massive opponent, the crowd starts booing, screaming at him to take his iron rank belt and get out of the ring. Comparing the two of them side by side, it's easy to see why they're worried. Kyle looks tiny next to the muscular mountain that is Gorai. Still, he keeps his cool. He doesn't care what they say, because this was the plan he and Bago agreed on from the start. Flashback to their first meeting. Kyle approaches Bago and asks if he wants to team up for the qualifiers, since he's the only powerhouse left without a partner. Bago gives him a flat refusal, but Kyle asks him to wait, offering to prove his strength right then and there. Shaking his head, Bago explains it's not about Kyle's rank, he just never intended to enter the tournament to begin with. He figures there's no point in trying when nobody can actually beat Rikudo anyway. When Kyle asks if the guy is really that dangerous, Bago just gives a grim nod, confirming it. Bago clenches his fist, swearing he'll never lose to the same person twice. When Kyle hears that, he realizes the two of them have a history together. Looking away, Bago admits he made a choice to stop fighting meaningless battles. He glances at a group of shivering kids, saying he only throws punches when he has someone to protect. Looking closer, Kyle realizes these kids are actually other worlders just like him. He knows they stand no chance in this world without a guardian since they're so young. Turning to Bago, he asks if he'd join the tournament if it meant protecting them. Bago remains realistic, explaining he won't join a match he has no hope of winning. Flashing a confident grin, Kyle tells him to just sit back and watch because he's already found a strategy to beat Rikudo. Bago watches him walk toward the sunlight, admitting he's putting all his faith in that plan. Still, he warns that Rikudo is the only threat waiting for him in the brackets. As he steps onto the sand, the massive arena makes him look even smaller. Standing alone against seasoned veterans like Gorai, Bago wonders if he can really win this whole thing by himself. High above in the VIP box, the glowing elven woman asks if this plain-looking guy is really the favorite. The vice commander admits he doesn't look like much, but he's still interested. She just smirks, noting that the kid probably shares the commander's bad luck with women. Likud tells her to just watch and see if the guy is the real deal. Down on the sand, Kyle keeps a steady gaze on his opponent. Gorai just smirks back, looking completely relaxed and twice his size. Finally, the referee shouts for the match to begin. Gorai immediately tenses his massive frame, winding up for a heavy strike right out of the gate. He launches his signature move, the Golden Fist, which looks like a literal wrecking ball aimed straight at the kid. Seeing their champion pull out his favorite technique, the crowd erupts in cheers. Gritting his teeth, Kyle watches the strike close in, sweating as he realizes just how fast this giant can move. The blow slams right into his stomach, doubling him over as the force of the impact ripples through his body. Watching from above, the elven commander remarks on how easily he went down. Gorai looks on with a smug grin, telling the Iron Belt to just forfeit before things get worse. Still gasping for air, he doesn't look intimidated at all. He springs back into a ready stance, shouting that they won't know the outcome until he actually tries. Gorai just scoffs at the effort, telling him it's useless to even try. While he presses the attack, he starts reflecting on his life as a circus performer before he was brought to this world. Practicing contortion every day, he pushed his flexibility to the limit to find the ideal body. Since being reincarnated, he's finally reached that level of perfection he's been hunting for. He twists his limbs into a bizarre knot, flashing a creepy grin while bragging about his ultimate form. Standing across the sand, he tells Kyle that getting close to this body is impossible. Without a shred of doubt, he says the match is over and Kyle is going to lose. In the history of fighting games, there have always been characters designed to keep you at a distance. Known as long-range specialists, they use their insane reach to control the pace of the match from the other side of the screen. Watching the fight, the elven woman realizes Gorai fits this frustrating archetype perfectly. She explains that without a projectile or a way to close the gap instantly, Kyle is just a sitting duck. Kyle stands his ground, but he's looking pretty rough as the woman wonders if he actually has any tricks left up his sleeve to handle this. Watching from her throne, the Demon Queen looks unimpressed, wondering why Kyle talked so much game if he was just going to get pushed around like this. Gorai just keeps laughing, clearly enjoying how much control he has over the pace of the fight. He throws another massive punch that sends Kyle sliding back, forcing him to stay in a purely defensive shell just to survive. He starts shuffling his feet, inching backward little by little. Watching the lack of action, the crowd starts booing and telling the ref to just end the match. The vice commander sighs, figuring he has finally lost his will to fight back. While the Demon Queen calls the stalemate boring, Isekai'd thinks there is something interesting going on. He keeps his eyes glued to the arena, warning her to just watch because something very strange is about to happen. She lets out a sharp gasp, her eyes widening as she witnesses the impossible. Down in the arena, the massive Gorai is suddenly thrown back against the stone wall, looking completely dazed. Kyle just stands his ground in the center, having somehow closed the distance in a single, blurring instant. The observers are stunned by the speed, unable to process how Gorai went from dominating at range to hitting the dirt. Even the elven woman is confused, as it looked like the giant just tripped over his own feet. Looking dazed, the big man stares up and wonders how his body even failed him. He quickly pushes himself back up, growling that it must have been a fluke. Determined to end this, he pulls back his arm for a massive golden fist while Kyle stays perfectly still. He misses his mark and slams onto the floor, shouting in shock while Kyle just watches from a safe distance. Up in the stands, the elves are in total disbelief, screaming that the champion just wiped out for a second time. Gasping for air, Gorai starts to realize this wasn't some fluke, he is actually taking serious damage. The observers are left completely confused, wondering how Kyle is even attacking when they're still standing half an arena apart. When the vice commander asks if he's following any of this, Isekai'd gives a surprisingly simple answer. He explains that Kyle didn't do anything fancy, he just kicked him. Sounding totally lost, she wonders how that's even possible from such a huge distance. Isekai'd admits that while a long reach is powerful, it always comes with a glaring flaw. As Gorai stretches his arm out for another strike, Kyle finally makes his move. He isn't aiming for the body, he's timing his kick to hit the arm while it's still fully extended. Isekai'd explains that the longer the reach, the bigger the risk of leaving a gap if the attack misses. His vice commander looks confused, figuring that's just common sense for any fighter. Shaking his head, Isekai'd points out that she is only thinking about the pause after a move finishes. He is actually talking about the limb itself while it's still reaching out. Since that extended arm is still part of the body, Kyle treats it as a vulnerable target that's just as easy to damage as a chest or a head. He leans into the impact, slamming his boot right against the incoming fist with perfect timing. Watching from the sidelines, Isekai'd points out that the boy wasn't just running away to survive. The commander notices he was actually measuring the exact distance where the gent's reach would fall just short. By waiting for that tiny window where the punch whiffed, he launched a counterstrike against the limb itself. Isekai'd calls this specific move a whiff punish, looking like he's finally solved the mystery. When the vice commander asks if anyone could actually have those kinds of reflexes, he just smiles. Shrugging, he explains that being able to time it so perfectly proves the guy is the real thing. Kyle stands calmly over the fallen gent, looking like he just finished a routine match. To Isekai'd, There is only one label for someone with this level of skill, a true pro-fighting gamer. He looks off toward the stands, his expression unreadable as the commander processes that title. Rio explains that back in the other world, these gamers were specialized madmen who threw their entire lives away just to master a digital fight. By doing that, they gained a level of technical knowledge that's simply on another level from everyone else. Down on the dirt, a few observers think the match is still going since both men are on their feet. Still, she just smiles and says it's already finished. Looking at the tournament bracket, he figures these matches are won by whoever adapts the fastest. It's all about spotting an opponent's habits before they even realize they have them. Since Kyle is already wearing a confident smirk, it's clear he's already cracked the code. Every time Gorai takes a hit, he completely abandons his offense to play it safe. Shifting his focus to defense, he prioritizes keeping his distance, which reveals his true weakness is fighting up close. Kyle suddenly closes the gap and grabs him, turning the massive fighter's momentum into a perfect throw. Staring in total disbelief, he's lifted off his feet, completely unable to stop it. Isekai'd points out that Gorai's big, slow swings leave him with no way to peel someone off once they're in his face. Once he's actually caught, there's really no escape. He stands over his opponent while the announcer screams that the match is officially over. The big guy is face down and out cold on the dirt. Watching from the sidelines, Rio figures a long-range fighter like Gorai was just a bad matchup for someone who counters that fast. When she checks the next bracket, she realizes the difficulty is about to spike. It turns out his next opponent is a powerhouse named Ryu, who specializes in the same close-range brawling he just used to win. But the masked leader isn't so sure the next fight will be so simple. Turning to Isekai'd, he asks if the commander knew he was the one who originally built the kingdom's ranking system. Isekai'd confirms it, remembering how the master pushed for massive reforms right after his own championship win. Then, the leader asks a cryptic question, wondering if they even understand what being a gold rank fighter really means. Looking down at his gold belt, he admits it isn't a badge for the best. It's a sign that the skill level in this country has officially hit a dead end. He explains that he actually wanted to include platinum and diamond ranks in the system, but since nobody could get past gold, there wasn't any point in adding them. Hearing this, Isekai'd asks if he's saying Kyle is already playing at that higher level. Meanwhile, Kyle just focuses on the next round, not realizing he is literally off the charts. Between his technical counter hits and his talent for reading habits, the leader admits he is easily a diamond tier fighter. He doesn't stop there, bringing up a master rank that serves as the true peak of this world's power. Isekai'd follows him through the quiet halls, asking how their own gold tier champion, Ryu, compares to that level. Even if Kyle runs into a bad matchup or finds himself struggling in close range, the leader isn't worried. Shaking his head, he explains that the fundamental skill gap is just too massive for it to even matter. Proving the leader right, Kyle lands a hit that sends Gorai's head snapping back for a clean finish. He walks away without a word while the announcer officially declares the win for him and Bigo. The crowd is on its feet, shouting about how a couple of iron ranks just embarrassed to gold rank veterans. Isekai'd looks pretty worried, figuring that if the leader is right, then nobody in the whole kingdom can actually touch Kyle. Shaking his head, the masked leader says there's still one person left who can. He leans forward and reveals that he's a master rank fighter himself. While looking out at the other gladiators, he explains that matches are only interesting when there's a bit of a handicap to bridge a massive skill gap. He believes that adding a bit of mental pressure is enough to change the outcome of any fight, no matter how strong the opponent is. Suddenly, a voice shouts for the referee to stop, putting a hold on the next match before it can even start. The masked leader looms over the defeated pair, telling them that losing comes with a heavy price. Handing out judgment, he offers them two choices for their punishment. The first option is to retire immediately, which means walking straight into the iron cages waiting behind them. Choosing the second option means they keep fighting. Either way, He's throwing them into slave pens to be sold to nobles once the tournament ends. To make sure they never forget this loss, he pulls a glowing metal brand from the fire to mark them both. The leader smiles, saying he's going to carve the proof of their failure right into their skin. Looking at the white hot iron, it's clear he's enjoying this way too much. Then, he stands before the pair and tells them to make their choice already. The mark itself is a jagged symbol meant to show the whole world they failed. Over by the arena gates, the guards just watch and wait for the sentence to be carried out. Standing before the masked leader, Gorai admits they were completely destroyed this time around. Ryo doesn't look upset though, mentioning she feels no shame since she saw firsthand that Kyle is the real deal. He even thinks meeting someone that's strong and losing is a lesson he will treasure for the rest of his life. Instead of showing fear, they both actually smile and tell the leader to get on with the branding, since they'll wear the mark as a point of pride. Accepting their choice, the masked leader gives a slight smirk and tells the guards to get on with it. Gripping the handle, a guard slams the white-hot iron directly into Ryo's shoulder. She grinds her teeth, staying as steady as she can while the skin smokes. It hits Gorai next, and he can't hold back a raw scream as the brand sinks deep into his flesh. The guard pulls the iron back, leaving the mark to smoke as the announcer calls for the next match to begin. Everything feels quiet for a second under the hot sun of the Colosseum. Looking up from the arena floor, Ryo wonders if that brutal display was enough to actually shake Kyle's resolve. He hasn't moved a muscle, having watched the entire ceremony without even twitching an eyebrow. Ryu tells her there is no need to rush. From his high balcony, the masked leader explains that mental pressure like this is a slow poison that takes time to really sink in. Contrary to the leader's plan, Kyle doesn't slow down at all. He just keeps on winning, tearing through the competition and ending matches almost as soon as they start. Surprisingly, Bigo decides to sit out from the second round onwards, choosing to withdraw from the front lines entirely. That leaves him to handle every battle solo, but he doesn't seem to mind the extra work. While clearing the arena, he watches the losers suffer out of the corner of his eye, never losing his focus. He ends up winning every single match in a total landslide. Standing over his fallen opponents, he raises a fist while the crowd goes wild. Up in the stands, Ryu finds herself unable to look away. She notices he isn't even bothered by the mental games or the branding. Instead, he just keeps that intense look, driven by a conviction that seems impossible to break. Honestly, seeing that level of focus starts to get to her. She admits to herself that his presence is actually making her feel a bit flustered. Still feeling a bit flustered, she listens as the masked leader looks over the balcony and mentions the time is finally coming. She asks him for a bit more detail on what he means by that. The leader explains he is just waiting for the moment Kyle's calm face finally twists in distress. Down in the arena, Kyle stands perfectly still, showing no signs of the mental pressure. Noting that the finals are right around the corner, she wonders if anything could actually shake him this late in the game. The announcer calls for the semi-finals, and Kyle steps onto the field with Bigo towering right behind him. He keeps his head down, just tightening his gloves as the crowd roars. Up in the stands, Ryu keeps a close eye on him, searching for any sign of a crack in his armor. Suddenly, she freezes, spotting something she never expected to see. For the first time in the tournament, his stoic face actually breaks, his cheeks flushing as he looks visibly flustered. Seeing him lose his cool like this catches her completely off guard. The reason for his blushing finally steps into the light as the announcer calls out his opponents, Kyuko and Kako. Even though they're covered in dirt and grime from earlier matches, they aren't backing down. Up in the stands, the Demon Queen leans forward with a sharp grin, ready for the main event to finally kick off. She watches as the announcer confirms Bigo has officially withdrawn, giving the first win to Kako by default. Since that ties up the team score, the arena moves straight into the final tiebreaker. Ryu looks on with a serious expression, clearly feeling the weight of the moment as the stakes climb. As the crowd goes wild, Kyle steps into the center of the ring to meet his final opponent. Kyuko walks out to face him, looking more focused than ever as she prepares to fight her own teacher. She clenches her fist and tells him straight up that she's going to give this everything she's got. Pointing a finger confidently, she shouts that victory is already theirs. Kyle meets her gaze with a skeptical look, asking what makes her so sure she can pull it off. She just gives him a sharp, eager smile and tells him he'll find out the reason once they start fighting. Kyle accepts the challenge, raising his fists and acknowledging that she wouldn't be standing in the semifinals without a real plan. Figuring she has some kind of secret weapon ready, he decides it's time to see what she's actually got. She doesn't back down, keeping her eyes locked on him with a look of intense focus. Then, with both of them in position, the signal for the final match to begin finally rings out. Kyle doesn't wait a second, lunging forward to take the initiative right away. Watching him charge, the glowing elven woman looks on in shock, since he usually waits for his opponent to move first. Just as he closes the gap, Kyoko drops into a low crouch and catches him with a perfectly timed leg sweep. He feels the impact and acknowledges her form, noting she's really reading the timing of the engagement. Still, he isn't worried, figuring this move is just the very first page of the lessons he taught her. She immediately follows up with a relentless flurry of strikes, forcing him into a defensive shell. Shouting with every hit, she stays right in his face to keep the momentum going. He grits his teeth and admits her ground game has gotten way better than he expected, since the ground pressure is so intense. He starts bracing himself for an attack from above. Kyuko's eyes go wide with a wild grin, showing she's completely locked into the zone. She lunges into the air with a deafening scream, committing to the exact overhead attack he was waiting for. Tracking her trajectory perfectly, he notices she's finally learned to keep her eyes on the target while midair. Still, he figures her aerial damage is still pretty low, so he prepares to just tank the blow. That plan fails immediately when she shifts midair, dropping a heavy axe kick that catches him totally off guard. Gritting his teeth, he realizes this isn't just a simple jump, but a follow-up he never actually taught her. The impact is massive as her heel slams into him, pinning him to the dirt. It's a full combo that leaves everyone, including the Demon Queen, staring in disbelief. Kyle hunches over and gasps for air, clearly feeling the weight of those blows. Across the arena, Kyoko creates some distance to reset her stance. She lets out a triumphant shout, looking completely fired up after proving she can hold her own. As she waits for him to get back up, he admits to himself that the move actually caught him off guard. He looks down for a moment, noting how she really stuck to the basics while adding her own flavor to her ground game. Seeing her flush with effort, he realizes she even figured out how to link those moves into full combos on her own. After dusting his hands, he casually asks if that's really the end of her big play, leaving her completely stunned. He shifts his weight and plants his foot, getting ready to finally push back. Looking her right in the eye, he admits he's actually a bit disappointed if this was all she had prepared to defeat him. She isn't letting those words get to her, charging right back into his space to stay aggressive. Thinking she can catch him off guard, she drops low for a quick leg sweep, but he is already one step ahead, sliding his foot back just enough to let her kick nothing but empty air. With her balance completely shot from the miss, he immediately steps in to return the favor with a trip of his own. Watching from the stands, the overseer points out that he just baited her into a textbook whiff punish. He explains that Kyoko is basically obsessed with timing her attacks for whenever her opponent tries to close the distance. Since she's so focused on that one specific window, her leg sweeps become incredibly easy to predict. Kyle thus dances around the very edge of her range, teasing her until she can't take the tension anymore. Finally losing her patience, she lunges forward with a shout to commit to the strike. She has no clue she's falling for a bait chance, which he planned from the very start. Watching from the balcony, the overseer points out that her ground game is just as flawed as her aerials. She is throwing nothing but heavy, wide arc swings in a desperate attempt to finally land a hit. While those attacks pack a punch, they leave her balance completely shot and her guard wide open. Seeing the gap, Kyle steps right into her space to deliver a crushing counter blow. Blood spatters the stone floor as the strike connects. Kyoko staggers back, bleeding from her lip as she gasps for air. He stays calm, asking her if she finally sees where she is going wrong. Without saying a word, she leaps into the air to try another jumping attack. Seeing her make the same mistake, he decides he'll have to make her understand through force. This is the exact opening he needs for a devastating anti-air combo. Kyoko throws a desperate upward strike, but her heart sinks when her fist only catches empty air. Looking from the side, it's clear he stayed just outside her reach on purpose. He already noticed that her anti-air moves have a tiny hitbox with almost no forward range. By baiting her with an empty jump, he forced her to commit to a move that was never going to land. Watching from above, the Overseer points out that missing an anti-air in this world is a deadly sin. His companion wonders if it's really that serious, but the answer comes almost instantly. Kyle buries a heavy punch straight into her stomach while she's still frozen in her recovery frames. The impact sends her reeling, proving exactly why leaving yourself open like that is a death sentence. With no way to dodge, she's forced to take the maximum amount of damage possible. The fist slams into her face with a heavy thud, snapping her head back as the raw power of the hit finally explodes. She skids across the cold stone, finally coming to a halt as the dust settles. Seeing the fight is over, the official looks on with a quiet, analytical expression. High above in her balcony, the Demon Queen cackles as she declares him the winner, clearly enjoying how he showed her zero mercy. Still, he doesn't look very impressed, admitting he felt a tiny bit of growth from her before noting how unfortunate the result was. He points out she was just repeating the basic drills he taught her, which is why she could never win. In his eyes, staying this predictable means she has no future. Kyoko grits her teeth and curses, her frustration boiling over as she stays pinned to the ground. Looking down at her, he admits he saw this exact outcome coming from the very beginning. She thinks back to the qualifiers, admitting she felt pretty invincible after crushing the competition in the lower ranks. However, once the real tournament began, that confidence was immediately shattered by how brutal the matches actually are. Even while covered in bruises, she stares back at him and insists that, somehow, they'll be the ones who win it all. Looking down at her hands, she wonders how she even made it this far if her skills are actually that bad. While she struggles with the thought, the announcer shouts that it's time for the next showdown between winners. The fans are already screaming, clearly obsessed with seeing more from the girl they've been following. Still, Kyle just stands there listening to them chant for their miracle fighter, wondering why the atmosphere feels so strange and intense. Kyoko stares down at her feet and apologizes, admitting that she probably can't win against anyone else. Looking completely shaken and covered in bruises, she repeats his words back to him. She finally understands that her attacks were just unavoidable cheese moves all along. The crowd is already roaring for more, chanting her name and begging to see those cheap tactics in action again. Overhearing them, Kyle stops in his tracks and wonders if she really relies on that kind of playstyle. Historically, these types of infinite loops and unblockable sequences have been making gamers scream in pure frustration. While some can be avoided if you know the trick, others are designed to crush you simply because you don't understand the mechanic yet. He stares at her, wondering if her style is actually the perfect version of that nightmare. The vice captain shouts for the semifinal match to start, signaling the beginning of the showdown. He squares up against her, focused on spotting the exact moment she tries to start one of her loops. Suddenly, he freezes in confusion. Kako drops straight into a low crouch, just sitting there and waiting for him to make the first move. Suddenly, she explodes out of that crouch, launching herself through the air with a massive dropkick. Bracing for the impact, Kyle recognizes the move, but senses there is something else going on here. That something else turns out to be pure weight. He grinds his teeth while blocking, noticing the hit keeps him stuck in a defensive stance for way too long. Just as he feared, she uses that opening to lunge in. Shouting for him to get ready, She hauls him into the air and drives him straight into the dirt with a massive power bomb. Beigo watches from the sidelines with a worried look, while the crowd roars for more. She drives him straight into the dirt with a brutal power bomb. Coughing up dust, he struggles to even catch his breath after a hit like that. As he lies there, Kako actually apologizes for the brutal slam. She looks almost worried, even though she's the one who just put him in the dirt. Up in the stands, people are already whispering, asking if that was the famous cheese move everyone was talking about. The logic behind her attack is pretty nasty, using a fast jumping kick to stun the target before going straight into a command throw. These aren't your average grabs. They hit much harder and have a wider reach than anything a normal fighter can do. Still, watching from the VIP box, the vice captain notes that while the combo is strong, even a move this powerful has a weakness. Kyle knows this better than anyone as he starts to pick himself back up. Staring her down, he figures this level of cheese is enough to actually beat him. See, every high damage command throw comes with a massive trade-off. Unlike a normal grab, if this move misses, it leaves the attacker wide open for a counter. He figures there are a few specific ways to shut down a command throw like this. For starters, the move is completely useless if the target is in the air. Right after blocking that dropkick, he realizes the follow-up grab has a fixed timing. By simply jumping at the right moment, he can bypass the entire unblockable threat. Beyond just dodging, a vertical hop would leave her wide open for him to land a massive counterattack. As she lunges in, he tells himself this is the exact second he needs to take flight. But he doesn't even get the chance to leave the ground. Instead of jumping away, he's met with a massive hand slamming right into his face. His eyes go wide with shock as he realizes his timing was completely off. Instead of taking flight, he feels her fingers dig deep into his face as she slams him back. He tries to resist, but she has him completely locked in place, refusing to let him escape the grab. Then, she heaves him backward with a sudden burst of strength, sending him spinning through the air. The vice captain watches in silence while Isekai'd identifies the move as Kako's signature cheese loop. Even though Kyle predicted the grab and tried to jump to safety, he was playing right into a much deeper trap. Anticipating the escape, she offers a quick apology while striking him during the tiny window where his guard dropped to leave the ground. This isn't just a basic trick, it's a high-level sequence meant to shut down even the best players. Isekai'd watches the match with a smirk, calling this a perfect 50-50 situation. Since that initial kick was blocked, Kyle is now forced into a guessing game where there aren't any safe answers. Panting and covered in dirt, he struggles to figure out his next move before the window for a counter closes. She just keeps that confident smile, knowing she holds all the cards after landing her first strike. She finished the sequence with her signature Keiko-chan bomb, slamming him headfirst into the arena floor. The impact is brutal, pinning him to the dirt as the dust kicks up. Watching the fall out, Isekai'd points out that guessing wrong in a mix-up like this comes with a steep price. He has to take the full force of the attack with no way out. Watching from the sidelines, Isekai'd notes that against a perfect-to-choice guess, it doesn't matter how strong you are. He admits he actually hates this archetype of fighter because their tactics feel so cheap. These massive grappler characters are a different breed, built to end matches with just a few huge, unblockable throws. This dynamic creates a universal tension that affects everyone involved, from the one landing the hits to the one trying to survive the loop. Gritting his teeth, he stares ahead with a blooded face. Being on the receiving end of these tosses is enough to make anyone's blood boil. Nearby, she looks completely overwhelmed, panting as tears start to fall. Though she apologizes for becoming too strong, the narrator notes that landing these moves actually gives the user a twisted sense of pleasure. Since these tactics feel so cheap, even some of the world's top pro gamers openly admit they can't stand dealing with them. Isekai'd watches closely, wondering how Kyle will handle this situation. He knows that even against a prize student, there is no room left to hold back. Looking at the remaining health, the next split-second decision is going to decide the entire match. If he gets caught by another command throw, his life bar hits 0 and it is game over immediately. But if he takes a regular strike instead, he might survive, with just a tiny sliver of health to try and reset. Turning to the vice captain, Isekai'd asks what she would do in this spot. To stay in the fight, he has to either jump to dodge the grab or block to stop the hit. The vice captain admits that if she were in his shoes, she'd go for the jump. Nodding, Isekai'd agrees that prioritizing survival above everything else is the most logical play. Still, he mentions that being too rational just makes a fighter easy for an opponent to predict. While the elven woman listens in silence, he doesn't stop there. This forced, predictable logic is exactly what makes him hate grapplers so much. He explains that fighting a grappler like her always turns into a game of pure luck, no matter how good the players are. While some gamblers love that high-stakes rush, Isekai'd admits he hates leaving his fate to a coin toss. If it were him in the arena, he figures he'd just use long-range attacks to keep her at a distance and avoid the trap entirely. Unfortunately, Kyle doesn't have any of those options left and finds himself cornered for another impossible choice. Despite the pressure, he just looks down at his battered gloves and realizes her little loop isn't enough to finish him off. He peers over his guard with a cold, sharp gaze, deciding it's finally time for a lesson. Since he was once known as the legendary master of cheese, he's going to show her what a real, terrifying loop actually feels like. She lunges forward with total confidence, declaring that this match is already over. Thinking about how smart he is, she figures her teacher is probably bracing for a punch. Instead of playing it safe, she decides to end the fight right here. With a desperate shout, her eyes narrow as she reaches out to snag him for a high-damage throw. But instead of her fingers finding purchase, a heavy fist slams right into her jaw. She freezes in disbelief, unable to understand why she's the one taking damage. Crouching low, he drives his knuckles into her chin with everything he has left. He didn't bother jumping or blocking, he just beat her to the punch. She hits the dirt, clutching her face and trying to figure out how she's the one on the ground when she definitely moved first. Still, her eyes dart around while she struggles to make sense of the impact. Looking up at him, she wonders if her teacher used some secret technique specifically meant to shut down throws. If that's true, it means her most dangerous weapon was actually her biggest weakness. She decides to pivot, thinking she just needs to land a regular strike to finish the job. Before she can even connect, Kyle drives a massive uppercut straight into her chin, sending her soaring. Frozen in midair, she can't believe her secondary attack was shut down too. Up in the stands, Isekai'd and the vice captain watch the scene in disbelief, wondering thus how he's pulling this off. Isekai'd identifies the move as a buppa, which is basically just throwing out a massive attack when you're backed into a corner. Trying to wrap her head around the term, the vice captain wonders if he's been saving this trick for the entire match. She explains it's a high-stakes gamble where a fighter fires off a special move blindly to flip the momentum. Down on the arena floor, Keiko is in a daze as she finally puts the pieces together. She realizes it wasn't just a lucky hit at the exact moment he launched it. That attack was designed to beat both strikes and throws at once. Kyle stands there looking pretty beat up, but he's finally revealed his secret weapon, a move with perfect invincibility. Watching from the stands, Isekai'd's assistant looks worried and asks if a move that powerful is basically cheating. Isekai'd just shrugs it off, explaining that in a fight like this, failing to land a proper anti-air is a deadly sin. Still, he notes that if she had just stayed calm and blocked the strike, the invincibility wouldn't have saved him. Looking at him on the ground, it really seemed like he had already lost. The commander explains that a buppa is just a high-stakes gamble to turn a bad situation around a choice where failure means death. Nodding along, the elf woman admits that if Keiko had only noticed the trick, the match would be over. Keiko was right on the edge of winning. Still, Isekai'd notes that while it was a real possibility, he isn't calling it just yet. Waiting for the next move, Kyle stays calm and steady. He acts like a man who's already figured out how to win this. Both fighters take a second to reset their distance, measuring each other up again. Crouching low, Keiko stares him down, realizing that since her strikes and throws were both shut down, she needs to find a third option. With a loud shout, she lunges forward into a flying kick to see if an aerial attack can finally break his defense. Kyle meets her head-on, driving a massive uppercut straight into her chest before she can even finish the kick. Lifting her clean off her feet, he sends her spiraling backward through the air. This single, explosive strike completely crushed her momentum. The vice captain is completely stunned, shouting about how he managed to counter that high-speed kick with a perfect anti-air. In the stands, spectators join in the hype, figuring his reaction speed is just insane for a guy his age. However, the commander cuts through the noise, telling them that reflexes had nothing to do with that move. While Keiko lies face down on the stones, the focus shifts back to the man who just dropped her. Reflecting on his pro gamer days, he admits people used to call him a cheap player who only relied on infinite loops. Still, he insists he never actually used dirty tricks, hinting that something else was really going on. He explains that his real secret is just crushing every option the opponent has until they can't move. He calls this a tactical lock, where the match is basically decided before it even starts. Looking down at Keiko, he points out that her big dropkick has a really obvious tell that gives her away every time. Before she ever leaves the ground, she always starts the move by crouching low. Pulling her arms back like that makes it easy for him to see exactly when she's about to jump. The vice captain realizes he didn't just react to the kick, he knew it was coming before she even moved. Nodding along, the commander points out that he kept his real skills hidden until the very last second. It turns out he was holding back the entire time, and thus to see how far his student could push herself. Watching closely, the commander is finally convinced that he's found a true fighting gamer worthy of being his next opponent. Back on the arena floor, Kyle stands over her and says the fight is officially over since he solved every single one of her patterns. She shouts that she absolutely refuses to lose, even as she struggles to stay on her feet. Looking beat up but calm, he points out that she is completely out of options. She doesn't care about the logic, admitting that her best friend's safety is on the line if she fails here. This desperation triggers a memory of her childhood, back when she was a small, easy target for bullies at school. Back then, she was always saved by those two close friends who never hesitated to step in for her. She felt lucky to have them, but she also felt pathetic for always being the one who needed help. That feeling of shame stayed with her for years. Everything changed when she arrived in this world and realized she finally had the strength to stand on her own. Tears stream down her face as she screams that it's finally her turn to be the protector. Kyoko stands there in shock, taking in the raw emotion. Tightening her grip, she mentions a promise she made to Miku to look out for her specifically. Kyoko just looks at her, softly saying her name as the weight of the confession hits her. Keiko shouts that her friend is still a total virgin, making the emotional moment take a sudden, awkward turn. She just stands there in shock, unable to even find the words to respond. Watching with a tired, deadpan look, Kyle stays quiet while she insists her friend's innocence is on a completely different level from everyone else. To prove her point, she starts rambling about the past, mentioning how her friend used to run away from boys and once got so overwhelmed during a health class that she had to go home early. Because of that, Keiko shouts that her friend doesn't even know how babies are made yet. She is sobbing now, yelling at Kyle to just give it a rest. Watching from the sidelines, even the elven woman seems a bit lost and asks for a quick explanation on where children actually come from. Ignoring the confusion, Keiko screams that she refuses to leave her innocent friend in the hands of savages like them. Rio watches the whole mess from the stands, thinking this might actually be an effective way to throw Kyle off his game. Any decent man would have a hard time ignoring a girl being used as a shield, especially one this desperate. Still, looking at his cold expression, she realizes that only matters if he is actually a decent person. Back in his old life, He was a sharp-looking salaryman who seemed to have everything going for him. Even so, everyone around him was confused why a guy with his elite status stayed single for so long. The truth is that he just looks at life's choices differently than a normal person. To him, letting emotions cloud a decision is just a bad play, and walking away is usually the smartest move. He's a hardcore fighting gamer at heart, which means he is always stuck in a specific mindset. Every moment is a calculation of risk and reward, but he still hits a wall when he runs into things his math can't solve. That wall happens to be romance. It's not like he was a total shut-in back in his old life, having dated a bit and even meeting up with old flames who seemed pretty fond of him. True to form, he tried to study the whole concept like it was just another data set he could crack with enough research. But no matter how much he analyzed the books, he could never find that one perfect, winning strategy. Eventually, he reached a weird conclusion. In the game of love, you never, ever throw out a reckless move without a plan. This logic makes sense when you find out that in his past life, he spent 43 years as a total virgin. Looking at his cold back, Keiko realizes there's just no way a man like that will ever understand the emotions she's pouring out. The commander starts chuckling, picking up on the awkward mood. Soon, he just bursts out, laughing at the sheer ridiculousness of the situation. Looking right at Kyle, he mentions he knows exactly what's going through his head. With a dismissive wave of his hand, he adds that overthinking it is a total waste of time anyway. He practically doubles over, mocking him with the idea that fighting gamers are just incapable of understanding a woman's heart. Kyle thus narrows his eyes, thinking it really depends on the guy. To get him focused, the vice captain offers up a bit of intel that he guarantees will make Kyle want to win this next match. He explains that the great western nation of Montero just finished picking their representative fighter. This champion was brought over through a secret summoning ritual, meaning he is a fellow traveler from another world. Kyle goes dead serious when he hears the man's title. Apparently, this new guy claims to be one of the 5 gods of fighting games. The newcomer wears a confident smirk while explaining how he used overwhelming power to crush everyone in the Montero region. Kyle's expression goes completely blank when he hears the name of the person this rival is hunting, the legend, Daigo Yumehara. Winning the regional title would finally grant him a seat at the table with the greatest player of all time. According to the rumors, he even told the local king that this specific match is the only prize he cares about. He even claims that if he finds a fighter stronger than himself, he'll use something called reverse summoning to recruit them for his own pro team. Keiko repeats the term with a blank look, wondering what on earth that even means. In the end, the goal is simple: mow down every single opponent until he reaches the very end. He stands there with grit in his eyes, focusing on the only goal that matters now. He realizes that if he can just take down the legend, Yumehara, he finally gets to go back to his original world. He stands there drenched in sweat, completely focused on that one single path home. Keiko just tilts her head, having no clue who this mystery man is. To Kyle, this person is the ultimate icon in the competitive fighting game world. Thinking back 30 years, he remembers a time when Yumehara was the only person who understood his technical playstyle. Even now, he wonders if he could have turned pro if his life hadn't ended so suddenly. Keiko stares at him, her voice barely a whisper as she realizes her master is actually crying. Seeing those tears, she finally understands just how much that legendary player meant to him. Kyle wipes his face and stands tall, leaving the sentiment behind. Keiko watches him closely, knowing he won't hold back a single hit anymore if it means reaching his goal. Looking down at her feet, she admits to herself that she doesn't have a prayer of winning this fight. She finally breaks, tears streaming down her face as the weight of the situation hits her. Looking on from the stands, the crowd starts whispering, confused why both fighters are suddenly crying. Kyle ignores the noise and tells her he is taking this win, even if it hurts. Staring back at him, she asks if he's really okay with that, reminding him that Kyoko is the one who will suffer if they lose. Keiko starts spiraling into a dark fantasy, imagining Kyoko being tormented by monsters and creepy nobles if they lose this match. Kyle snaps at her to stop, telling her she's clearly been reading way too much weird manga. Despite the ridiculous mental image, he looks pained as he stands his ground, admitting there are thus some things he's forced to see through to the end. Hearing that, she curls into a ball on the arena floor and starts sobbing, calling him a heartless monster and a total pervert for letting this happen. As she stays pinned to the ground, she shouts that he doesn't actually care about the legendary fight, he just wants to go home and leave them all behind. He can barely find the words to argue back. Still, any remaining doubt vanishes the second his eyes snap back into focus. Spotting a gap in her defense, he shouts that he's found an opening. He lunges forward with a sudden burst of speed, slamming a heavy strike into her that sends her reeling across the stone floor. Beigo and Ryo freeze in disbelief, realizing those tears were just a bait to set up a surprise attack. She clearly isn't ready to let the match end here. Grinning despite the impact, she sticks to the lesson of doing exactly what her opponent hates most. The queen laughs from the sidelines, calling this the ultimate psychological gamble. It all comes down to a split-second choice. Either he uses an invincible move to force a win, or she catches him with a risky command throw. Even the champion watches with a smirk, waiting to see who comes out on top of this final exchange. Up in the stands, Gorai watches in disbelief, wondering how an expert grappler is the one being thrown. Kyoko's face goes pale as the sound of the impact echoes through the stadium. Even the queen is left asking why, completely caught off guard by the sudden turn. Instead of a trade, he caught her midair and drove her back first into the hard stone floor. Staring down from his seat, the vice captain stays quiet, processing the fact that the match is over in a single heartbeat. Keiko stares into space with a glazed look, her body looking completely drained from the impact of the slam. Standing in the center of the ring, Kyle is officially declared the winner while the crowd erupts around him. While the stadium goes wild, the queen watches with a confused frown, wondering how the fight ended so fast. Still, he doesn't celebrate, he just stares at the floor, his expression dark and quiet. Up in the VIP box, Ryo is confused and asks why he would gamble everything on a simple throw. Leaning forward with a frown, the queen demands to know why he'd pick such a weak move when a strike would have lost. Rikudo explains it wasn't a mistake at all. Since he knew she was going to play it safe, the throw was the perfect counter. Still, she wonders if he simply bet on her being a coward in that moment. Down in the stands, Beigo and the others listen in, finally catching onto the high-level strategy they just witnessed. The rest of the crowd ain't nearly as analytical, and they start grumbling about how the whole match was a total letdown. A few guys sneer at the results, figuring Keiko had the win in the bag until she let her nerves get the better of her. The insults get even nastier as people call her a useless coward, leaving her and Kyoko sitting in the dirt while the stadium fills with mockery. Listening to the crowd tear his student down, Kyle stops in his tracks as the word coward rings in his ears. Turning back to face the stadium, he tells the crowd they don't have a clue what they're talking about. He explains that she has the sharpest instincts of all his students. Back when they were training, she was the one constantly studying his every move. Because of that, she figured out on her own that the best way to handle an invincible attack is simply to stand her ground and block. Gripping his fist, he admits he knew she had more courage than anyone when it came to protecting her friends. He trusted her to make the one choice that gave her the best chance at winning. He explains that because she is such a brave and strong fighter, he was forced to choose the throw to win. Knowing this mental game well, Rikudo reflects on how this kind of mental chess is what the pros call reading an opponent. Usually, a player just looks for a physical weakness or a habit they can exploit. But once the fighters reach a high level of skill, those patterns disappear, and it becomes nearly impossible to tell what they'll do next. That's when the mind games start looping, forcing you to pick the wrong move just to stay ahead of the curve. Kyle calls this a reverse choice, where you throw out logic entirely just to catch your opponent off guard. Looking down at her with a tired smile, he tells Keiko she was actually incredible. She breaks down into tears as he admits he's the one who would have lost the match if he didn't know her so well. From the balcony, the queen slowly starts clapping and calls the performance wonderful. She says she's deeply moved by the psychological battle, figuring that kind of deep reading only comes from the bond between a teacher and his student. Previously, she just looked down on their little group like they were kids playing house. Still, she admits their connection is exactly what made the match so special, while Kyle just stares back with a grim look on his face. In a surprising move, she offers a rare apology, admitting she was completely wrong about him. Still, he stays silent, just keeping a wary eye on her as she continues. She mentions that she actually has something else to thank him for, too. Pointing to the cheering crowd, she tells him their performance put the tournament at its highest peak. She confesses to the whole arena that she's feeling a strange physical rush she's never experienced before. An unsettling smile touches her lips. She says it's all because she got to witness such a wonderful bond between a master and his student. She suddenly grips her face, her eyes wide and bloodshot as she reveals her twisted logic. To her, there is no better show than watching a master forced to see his own students suffer. She looks genuinely ecstatic, asking if anything could ever top a spectacle like that. She stares down at the girls and demands they make a choice right now. Keiko and her teammate just sit there shivering on the stone floor, unable to even look up. Option 1 is to stay in the arena, but it comes at the cost of a permanent brand on their skin. To make the point clear, a guard already has the iron glowing red in the coals. If they choose to retire instead, they lose their status and spend the rest of their lives as common slaves behind bars. Seeing his students treated like toys finally snaps something inside Kyle. He glares at the throne, his teeth gritting together as he calls her a spoiled brat. He tells her straight up not to think everything will go her way. As she looks on with a confused tilt of her head, he tells her he has a proposal. Glancing back at the girls, he points out they're still just kids who are way too young for this. Finally, he stares her down and insists that as their master, he should be the one to take that ultimatum instead. The queen finds this trade-off pretty interesting. Gritting his teeth, Kyle waits for her to accept. Still, she reminds him that she isn't the one who actually gets to decide. Since it's their lives on the line, she tells the girls they must decide for themselves if they want to leave their fate in their master's hands. The choice before them is simple but horrific. If they want to keep their lives as gladiators, they have to accept the brand of the defeated. The only other path is retiring to become toys for the nobles, a fate that clearly terrifies them more than the pain. Faced with the impossible, they choose to stay in the fight. Keiko's face contorts in pure agony as the red-hot metal sears into her skin, marking her forever. Through the tears and the pain, Keiko doesn't back down, and Kyoko stands right beside her. They look the queen in the eye and say they'll follow whatever path their master chooses for them. The queen finds the whole drama pretty entertaining and asks Kyle what he's going to do. Before he can speak, a greasy noble interrupts, offering to buy both girls and have them retired from the arena immediately. He specifically keeps his eyes on Keiko, admitting he's willing to pay any price to make her his personal slave. Kyoko gently reassures Keiko, telling her not to worry about what comes next. She is certain their master would never actually let them become common slaves. To protect him, she explains they need to stand tall. If they look scared now, it will only make him hesitate during the final call. Keiko gives a small, quiet nod of agreement. Watching the tension build, the queen leans in and tells Kyle it's finally time to make his choice. He doesn't say a word, keeping his head down as the pressure of the moment settles over him. He finally breaks the silence, announcing that both girls are quitting as fighters to become his personal slaves. Staring up, Keiko's eyes go wide as she struggles to process what she just heard. Even the queen is caught off guard, asking him if he's really going to go through with that choice. Instantly, the girls start shouting in disbelief, demanding to know why he'd do something so impossible. Kyle looks them in the eye and tells them flat out they aren't suited for the life of a gladiator. Stunned, Kyoko calls him a liar and reminds him that he was the one who praised her strength. He admits they have plenty of talent, but explains that skill isn't the issue. When Keiko insists they have the resolve to fight, he shuts the argument down with one final question. He asks Kyoko point-blank if she could truly kill her friend in a real match. The question leaves her frozen, unable to find a single word to say. He points out that, unfortunately, this world just isn't fair. In this place, certain people at the top actually control the rules of combat. By twisting the system, they make sure they always stay in power. Looking out at the stadium, he warns them that no matter how much talent they have, this unfairness would eventually thus break them. So, instead of letting them get crushed, he tells them to get into the cell and wait where it's safe. Kyoko looks pretty hurt by his bluntness, wondering why he's pushing them away when they truly respect him. Looking even more worried, Keiko asks if even someone as strong as him can really win against such a rigged system. He just motions back toward the gate, promising they can watch his final battle from the safety of their bars. Keiko can only stare in silence, trying to process the weight of those words. He tells them it's time to move, leading the way away from the center of the arena. As they start walking, Keiko is still dazed, prompting Kyoko to check if she's really fine with this. Nearby, an official adjusts his glasses, looking like he's trying to swallow a bitter pill. With the signal given, the announcer roars the results to the crowd, declaring the Kyle and Go team the official winners. The heavy iron bars slam shut with a loud clank, sealing them inside the dim cell. Kyoko sinks to the floor, looking drained as she stares down at her shackled hands. Looking over at her friend, she asks why Keiko followed his orders so easily this time. Keiko stays by the bars, staring out into the hallway for a long moment. She explains that she just figures their master has a plan, and she's willing to trust him. Hearing that, Kyoko gives a small nod, admitting she feels the exact same way. They walk deeper into the stone hallway and find Nezuna and Miku already waiting. Both women look just as drained and battered as the rest of the group. Looking away in frustration, Keiko admits she was actually doing pretty well for a while before she finally lost. Still, she can't help but ask if they suffered the same fate and lost their matches too. Miku clarifies that it wasn't a normal loss. Nezuna actually chose to forfeit her match on purpose. Hearing this, Kyoko realizes her friend must have known what Kyle was planning from the very start. They look out toward the stadium as it finally clicks their master in just fighting other gladiators. He is challenging the rules of the world itself. At the time, Keiko admits she didn't really grasp how big of a deal that was. It wasn't until she watched the final match from behind those bars that the truth finally hit her. Looking out at the arena, she finally sees what her master really is. Kyle stands over his defeated opponent like a demon god, his raw power turning the stadium silent. He doesn't even look tired as he stares down at the beaten man. Seeing him like this, she realizes his strength is on a completely different level. Looking at the mangled mess left in the sand, she realizes he was going easy on them the whole time. If he'd actually been serious during their training, they would have ended up just like that. Even the organizers have to admit that he's the most dangerous challenger they've ever seen step into this arena. High up in the stands, the Demon Queen keeps her eyes on him, while her subordinates wonder if the commander even stands a chance. Isekai'd isn't worried at all, claiming his victory is already 100% guaranteed. Beside him, his subordinate looks a bit surprised by just how much confidence he has. While he admits Kyle is strong, Isekai'd insists there is a massive gap between them that goes way beyond raw power. He peers over the railing and explains that he's been watching every move from up here, decoding every single one of the gladiators' tricks. He figures combat is really just a form of information warfare, and it works the same way as any high-level fighting game. If the fighters are evenly matched in skill, then having data on the opponent becomes the most valuable weapon of all. In fact, the commander notes that the best players often spend more time studying their rivals than they do actually practicing. Since he holds the absolute upper hand in this data war, Isekai'd claims there is zero chance of him losing. There's no way he can be defeated now that he knows the secret. Turning away, he admits there might have been a tiny risk if this were their first encounter, but he's already seen everything he needs to see. High above the arena, the glowing announcer throws her arms wide, telling the crowd it's finally time for the match to decide the country's representative. She introduces their first fighter as the heavy stomp of metal boots echoes through the entrance tunnel. Commander Isekai'd steps out from the shadows, draped in heavy armor and a dark cape, looking perfectly calm as he walks onto the field. As the commander takes his place, Kyle and Bigo emerge from the tunnel to a deafening roar from the audience. The two of them stand firm, having clawed through every round to reach this final stage. Instead of being worried by their presence, Isekai'd just gives them a sharp, confident smile. He tells Kyle he's been waiting for this moment, promising that he'll be the first person to finally hand him a loss. Kyle just smirks at the threat, asking what exactly the elf thinks is happening here. As he admits he'll do anything to win, his expression doesn't even flicker. Pointing out that Isekai'd is getting way ahead of himself, he explains that the real fight hasn't even started. He presents Bigo as the vanguard, letting the massive warrior take center stage for the opening round. Isekai'd thinks the whole move is foolish, laughing at the idea of facing an opponent he's already beaten. He claims he's seen everything the warrior can do, so there are no surprises left. Smirking at his old rival, he's positive he knows exactly how this fight is going to play out. But Bigo shouts that the man standing there now is nothing like the one from the past. As things get heated, the story shifts back to the day Kyle first asked him to join the qualifiers. Walking through a quiet street, Kyle tells Bigo he doesn't actually need to fight this time. He just wants him to watch while he cooks up a plan to take Rikudo down. Bigo looks skeptical, wondering how someone can find a winning strategy without even stepping into the ring. Shrugging it off, Kyle mentions the hint was hidden in Rikudo's own words. Apparently, the captain claims that once he fights someone, he'll never lose to them ever again. Kyle figures that just means the guy relies entirely on reading his opponent's moves before the real match even starts. Since the tournament lets Rikudo scout everyone from the sidelines, he starts every fight with a massive advantage. To prevent him from learning any more, Kyle tells him he needs to avoid fighting normally and keep his real moves hidden until they finally face Rikudo. Bigo catches on quickly, giving a sharp grin as the logic sinks in. Even though he's faced Rikudo before and might have shown his hand, he clenches his massive fist and says it's fine. Looking determined, Kyle promises to teach him a special combat style built specifically to take Rikudo down. Rikudo nods along, acknowledging that Bigo claims to be a different person than before. Instead of being annoyed, the captain just smiles and says he's actually looking forward to seeing the difference. Just then, a long-eared tournament official steps in to go over the ground rules for the final match. He explains it's a gauntlet format, where the lone captain has to fight his way through both Bigo and Kyle one after the other. Brushing the thought aside, Rikudo figures getting through his first opponent won't be much of a hurdle anyway. Kyle looks over at Bigo and says there's no way anyone is winning against this new version of him. Smiling confidently, he explains it's because he's the one who personally taught him how to fight. Rikudo catches the tone and realizes Kyle probably gave his disciple a direct strategy to counter his own style. While that's true, Kyle mentions there's actually one more secret he passed on. He looks Rikudo dead in the eye and claims he's already figured out the secret behind his rival's strength. Rikudo assumes he's talking about his habit of scouting every fighter's movements throughout the event. Shaking his head, he tells him the truth is actually way more fundamental than that. The rival just smirks, admitting he has no idea what that means, but is even more excited for the fight now. High above the arena, the Demon Queen watches from her throne, raising a glass as she remarks on how interesting things are getting. Below, the official signals for the fight to start, and Rikudo stares down the massive warrior in the center of the stadium. Even though he doesn't know what training Kyle gave Bigo, he doesn't look worried. Shifting into his stance, he figures his first move is already set and prepares to dive in. He blasts forward instantly, unleashing a high-speed charge called the Dragon Rush. It's a signature blitz designed to end things before they even start. Bigo stays grounded as the attack comes screaming across the arena floor. Up in the stands, the spectators recognize it immediately as the captain's famous trademark. He pulls up his guard just in time, but the crowd notices he's already pinned down. Watching from the side, the elven woman calls the move useless since blocking won't actually stop the pressure. The projectiles are just relentless, with a new one firing before the last even hits his arms. It's a classic chip damage strategy, slowly draining his life away even through a perfect guard. He lets out a low grunt as the weight of the attack starts to feel heavy. Realizing he can't stay trapped forever, he finally reaches his limit and leaps high into the air to escape. But jumping was exactly what Rikudo wanted him to do. He catches Bigo midair with a massive vertical kick, slamming into him with perfect timing. This textbook anti-air move sends the big guy reeling before he even has a chance to land. He slams into the dirt while his opponent just stands there, demonstrating the perfect strategy for a long-range fighter. Pointing a finger like a teacher, Rikudo explains that these projectiles are designed to kill any forward momentum. Unlike fighting a physical brawler, these magical shots can be easily countered or shoved back. Since he can't block forever, jumping becomes the only way to avoid getting chipped away. Still, leaping blindly just turns him into easy prey for another anti-air kick. Breaking this iron-walled defense is going to require a very specific kind of knowledge. Kyle explains there's one vital rule for fighting a guy who spams projectiles from a distance. Shrugging off the basics, he warns that waiting until you see the shot to jump is a huge mistake. Against a pro, they'll just recover from the shot in time to swat you out of the sky with a follow-up. Your own reflexes just end up working against you in that situation. Realizing the danger, Bigo understands he has to jump on pure prediction instead of waiting for a visual. Winning this mental guessing game is the only way he's ever going to get close. Bigo hunkers down and tanks the projectiles, steadily closing the gap. He needs to get just close enough for his prediction to actually matter. Watching from the sidelines, Kyle knows there's a very specific distance where a jump attack can actually connect. Once the two fighters reach that exact sweet spot, he realizes the trap is finally set. Suddenly, Rikudo prepares to fire another shot. Bigo doesn't hesitate for a single second. He leaps into the air at the perfect moment, aiming to land a hit while his opponent is still stuck in the recovery of his move. Straining under the pressure, Bigo pours every ounce of weight into the strike while he has the chance. Kyle yells out from the sidelines, realizing the recovery on those projectiles is way faster than they anticipated. Despite the pressure, Rikudo stays perfectly still, watching the overhead attack with a cold, focused stare. He lets out a mocking laugh, telling Kyle that this whole plan is a complete letdown. Suddenly, Bigo drops into a deep, heavy crouch, startling the captain as the dark aura begins to swirl around his body. Looking at the strange posture, he wonders if the warrior is really trying to copy Kako's jumping kick. Shaking off the confusion, he thrusts his hand forward to fire another blast, figuring a simple charge is useless against his range. Instead of those shots stopping him, he just barrels right through the magic. He ignores the impact entirely, letting his dark aura soak up the damage while he winds up a massive counter. Lunging forward, he connects with a heavy punch that sends the mask flying across the arena. It's a massive hit that finally breaks through that elite defense, leaving the whole crowd stunned. The Elven Queen jumps to her feet, stunned that Bigo actually powered through those projectiles. Looking down at his opponent, Kyle admits he's a bit disappointed that such a high-level fighter fell for a simple bait. Rikudo groans while picking himself up, murmuring the words super armor in total disbelief. It's a technical gaming term for ignoring an attack's impact, and he can't figure out how a local warrior would even know it. Kyle just gives him a knowing smile, finally seeing the truth behind the man's technical skill. By bringing up terms like Wasita style and fighting gamer, he effectively calls the man out for being a fellow reincarnator. Standing there in his heavy armor, he doesn't deny it. He is finally exposed as another person from Earth, just like Kyle. While the girls watch from the sidelines, they notice his ears aren't pointed like the other people of this world. Despite the bad attitude, they admit he's actually a pretty good-looking guy. He looks down and quietly accepts the reveal, figuring he probably dropped many hints anyway. He confirms he's a reincarnator and a fighting gamer, just like Kyle. After winning his first big tournament, he even asked the old king for a tough-looking outfit just to change his image. Smiling slightly, he admits people used to underestimate him because of how he naturally looked. Since he wants to fight for real now, he decides to drop the act and return to his original self. A strange light surrounds him as his massive frame starts shrinking right there in the arena. Kyle can only stare, completely shaken as he realizes this small, plain figure is the guy's true form. She just stands there in a simple tank top and gym shorts, looking more like a middle schooler than a legendary warrior. The elven woman is completely speechless, questioning if this is really the same captain they've been following. As the shock wears off, he gets a good look at her face and finds himself thinking she's actually pretty cute. Back on Earth, Rikudu spent her days aiming to become a professional shogi player. She admits her skills weren't quite there yet, but she truly believed she could make it if she just kept training. However, reality isn't that simple, and she soon found herself shoved into a fancy kimono for a TV appearance. Her manager pushed the idea, telling her that her looks were the perfect tool to grab the public's attention. Being treated like a puppet eventually ruined her reputation, leaving her shunned by other players until she finally walked away from the game for good. She eventually found a new passion in fighting games. Discovering the genre's complex mind games, she realized the playstyle suited her perfectly because the competitive scene didn't care about gender or appearance. She finally felt like she belonged. Now, she sees this new world as the ultimate version of that dream. She grins with a fresh spark in her eyes, declaring that she will become the strongest person in this land. Facing Bigo, she admits he definitely isn't the same person he was before. A sharp smirk crosses her face as she points out that despite his growth, he's still even a challenge for her. Kyle stares at her with a heavy gaze, knowing he has to fight carefully if he wants to survive this version of her. Suddenly, she drops into a low stance and lunges back into the fray. Instead of following through with a strike, she leaps high into the air and retreats. Bigo stares at her in total confusion, wondering why she's suddenly running away. Even the announcers are puzzled, guessing she might just be trying to create space for more long-range attacks. Still, she doesn't stop, leaping further and further back toward the boundary. Kyle watches with a grim expression, realizing exactly what's going to happen if she hits the corner of the arena. She hits the wall and calls out that this is the screen edge. Kyle knows that in any fighting game, this is the most dangerous spot because it takes away every escape option. Seeing her trap herself like this, Bigo grits his teeth and wonders if she's just mocking him. Instead of looking scared, she tells him that the corner is actually more than enough room to finish the job. He grits his teeth and warns her not to regret choosing the corner as her final stand. From the sidelines, Kyle watches the standoff, knowing Bigo's charged tackle is his most dangerous weapon, because it has super armor and lets Bigo act first even if he's blocked. It's the ultimate tool for corner pressure. Seeing the opening, Kyle mentally tells him to go all out as the gent launches a massive tackle right at the cornered girl. She stares him down with a wide, focused grin, clearly ready for the impact. Bigo grinds his teeth as he slams into her, putting every ounce of strength into the collision. Suddenly, she catches the massive warrior and hoists him high above her head. Using his own weight against him, she turns that unstoppable tackle into a complete vertical lift. He freezes on the spot, realizing she timed the grab perfectly to intercept the tackle. It is hard for him to believe she spotted the move's weakness after seeing it just once. As it turns out, moves with super armor have one major flaw: they are totally useless against being thrown. Kyle recognizes the technique as a back throw, a tactical maneuver used specifically to swap positions with an opponent. That's when her real plan finally clicks in his head. Bigo tries to keep his cool, figuring he just took a single hit and can still recover. Still, as Kyle looks on, he knows it is already over because the giant is now the one pinned against the edge. Rikudu doesn't waste a second, calling out her dragon rush and hitting him with a rapid-fire flurry of strikes. Bigo struggles to stay upright, feeling the pressure mount as he's pelted by attacks he can't even see coming. There is simply no way for him to push forward through a barrage this dense. Panicking, the giant decides his only way out is to leap high into the air and hop right over her. A confident grin spreads across her face as she watches him go up, since she was counting on him trying to fly away. She launches herself upward with a move called the bucking horse, meeting him midair to shut down his escape. Gasping for breath back on the ground, he realizes he's pinned between her and the arena edge. When he tries to shove his way forward as a last resort, she immediately shuts him down with a sharp kick. The sight of his struggle sends her into a wild, frantic laugh. He has nowhere left to run. The elven officials just stare in silence, stunned by the speed of the finish. Watching from her throne, the demon queen takes a slow sip of wine and calls the display completely one-sided. Even Nizuna and Miku are left shaken, realizing the skill gap is even bigger than they thought. When the dust finally settles, the announcer declares Rikudu the winner. She raises a fist to the crowd while her giant opponent slumps against the wall, defeated. Kyle watches from the side, looking completely shaken by the technical display. He realizes she intentionally played the edge of the arena, using a back throw to swap spots and trap Bigo in an instant. From there, she just stayed at the ideal distance to keep the pressure on. Since Bigo had no room to move, any attempt to jump or charge in was immediately shut down. It's a strategy designed to take away every single option the opponent has. Kyle recognizes this suffocating setup as the birdcage. That crushing victory sends the crowd wild as she stands tall with her fists raised. They're all shouting that she's the strongest and that no one can touch her. Watching from the sidelines, the elf woman thinks about how strong her captain is and even how cute she looks. She's never felt more proud of her leader than in this moment. But then things get a little weird, because she starts wondering if seeing her captain lose might be even more exciting. She walks right up to Kyle and tells him it's a real shame. Smirking, she points out that his knowledge check gimmick trying to win with tricks the opponent doesn't understand failed miserably against her captain. Nearby, Bigo is slumped against the wall looking completely spent. He offers a quiet apology, admitting he should have listened to Kyle's advice, but Kyle just tells him he did more than enough. High above them, the demon queen leans forward in her throne with a huge grin, shouting that the moment everyone has been waiting for is finally here. Rikudu stares him down with a sharp smirk, clearly enjoying the tension in the air. Kyle meets her gaze with a silent, heavy stare. He doesn't look rattled, appearing fully focused on the fight ahead. They stand several feet apart, neither one making the first move yet. Flashing a sharp, eager grin, she mentions she's been waiting for a real match against a fellow pro gamer. He just watches her, keeping his expression stone cold. Looking back on her earlier win, he claims he was able to see through every trick she has. He adds that it's a shame she's already shown her hand like this. Staring her down, he declares that not a single move she owns will actually work on him. Up on her throne, the demon queen watches as the announcer calls for the final round of the selection match. Leaning forward with a sharp grin, she gives the command for the two of them to finally begin. Rikudu drops into her combat stance, confidently telling Kyle she's the one walking away with the win. As she speaks, a strange energy starts flickering around her hands, hinting that she still has a trick left to show him. That flickering energy explodes into a massive blast as Rikudu promises to win with overwhelming power. Despite the light show, Kyle stands his ground and tells her she's making one huge mistake. He admits he hasn't actually shown all his cards yet. Clenching his fists as they start to crackle, he reveals he's been saving his strongest technique for last. This final move is the one thing he's kept hidden the whole time. He lunges forward, shouting the name of his ultimate move, the Tyrant King Fist. Blinding energy glows in his palm as he prepares to end the match right here. On the other side, She just grins, looking like she's already won. He grits his teeth, focusing every bit of power into his hands to meet the coming attack. Matching his movements, she swings her arms around to build up as much power as possible. Within his palms, the energy condenses into a single, dense orb. Laughing, she fires her own blast right at him, sending a massive wave of energy across the arena. Then, with one final push, he thrusts his palms forward to release everything he's been holding back. Up in the stands, the Demon Queen's face twists into a manic grin as she watches the clash begin. Rikudo meets the challenge head-on, yelling as she pours every bit of her power into a counterblast. Even Rio is left speechless, her eyes widening as the impact ripples through the air. The moment the two forces collide, the entire Colosseum begins to shake from the pressure. Kyle leans into the struggle, forcing his dark energy to grind against the blinding light of the Tyrant King fist. With the pressure building, it feels like the entire arena might buckle under the weight of the two attacks. Beside her, Miku stays frozen, unable to look away as the match reaches its breaking point. Watching from the sidelines, Nazuna is completely paralyzed by the sight. Rikudo stares through the settling dust, trying to wrap her head around the man standing across from her. Looking at Kyle's focused posture, she wonders if her opponent was actually a projectile character all along. The possibility was always there from a technical standpoint, but it's still hard to believe he kept it hidden. What really gets her is that Kyle didn't fire a single shot until now, even when he was inches away from losing. Rikudo slumps against the stone wall, realizing all that talk about Bigo being a secret weapon was just a distraction. Seeing the truth finally come out, Rio wears a sharp grin as she realizes the entire struggle was just an elaborate performance. Admitting he did it all just to win, Kyle confirms it with a smirk. Treating his own allies like disposable pawns just to scout out a moveset is a cold strategy, but Rikudo can't help but be impressed. He even calls him a true gamer for that level of calculation, though Kyle just stands there looking like he has more to say. Rikudo is just going to take that sitting down, shouting that Kyle is dead wrong if he thinks one match is enough to read him. Unfazed, Kyle keeps his palms pressed forward and says they'll find out the truth soon enough. Even with the stadium floor cracking apart, neither side gives an inch as they stay locked in the center. Kyle screams as he pours every last drop of strength into his Tyrant King fist. Right across from him, Rikudo matches that energy with a wild shout of his own. Then, the two forces finally detonate, turning the center of the arena into a blinding wall of white light. As they clash, Rikudo explains that once players reach the top tier, pure skill isn't enough to settle things anymore. He's talking about character compatibility, the built-in advantages that exist regardless of the person behind the controller. Gorai watches from the stands, reminding everyone that in the old days, a bad matchup was a death sentence you couldn't just skill your way out of. He strains against the pressure, but Rikudo's blast slowly gains ground and starts pushing him back. Grinning through the clash, Rikudo says his recovery speed is far superior. As the energy crawls closer, he grits his teeth and figures a direct hit is coming soon. Jumping over the wave seems like the only way to close the gap. The elven woman keeps her eyes fixed on the fight from the stands. Still, she just smiles, knowing that jumping in is exactly what his owner wants. He goes for the leap anyway, but Rikudo catches him with a brutal anti-air that sends him crashing back down. Landing safely, his rival laughs and points out that his projectiles are just better, giving him the clear advantage. Kyle grinds his teeth, snapping back that it was just one lucky hit. Unimpressed, Rikudo dares him to try and deflect the next wave of shots instead. Instead of deflecting, he pulls his arms up to block, taking the heavy blast head-on. Watching from the sidelines, Kyoko worries that guarding is a losing strategy since his health is slowly chipping away. Realizing he can't stay pinned down forever, Kyle takes another gamble and leaps into the air. Up in the stands, the long-eared official sighs, thinking this is just a repeat of the same mistake from earlier. But one of the observers freezes, spotting something very different about this specific jump. Instead of lunging forward into the fire, he just jumps straight up. It is a simple vertical hop that keeps him exactly where he started. Watching from the sidelines, Kyoko is confused why he would give up his momentum just to avoid one hit. To her, it looks like he is just setting himself up to be a sitting duck. She expects him to get blasted, but the next shot never comes. Her eyes go wide as she realizes Rikudo is just standing there, completely unable to fire back. While his opponent is stuck, Kyle hits the ground and immediately sprints forward to finally get within striking range. Rikudo grits his teeth, wondering if his secret is out. He's starting to realize that Kyle figured out exactly how his charging mechanic works. Panicking, he realizes too late that he's been baited into making a huge mistake. Kyle drops low for a counter, catching him completely off guard. This is a perfect whiff punish, leaving the expert zoner wide open for the first time in the match. Up in the stands, Nazuna shouts that this is the window they've been waiting for. Watching him try to scramble back, she begs her master not to let him escape and reset the fight. Just as he closes the distance, Kyle decides to jump again, choosing the one move everyone thought he'd stop using. Up in the stands, his students are terrified, screaming that he's just begging for another anti-air and wasting the best opening he's had all fight. Rikudo watches him rise with a sharp grin, clearly seeing this jump as a total gift. Looking down from the VIP section, the elven woman smirks, convinced she's about to watch his final mistake. Instead of falling, he catches the kick on his arms with a perfect midair guard. Miku screams in shock, seeing him survive the one move that should have ended it. Since the block was successful, he's going to be the one who gets to move first once they hit the ground. Nazuna watches the opening, noticing that the opponent's defenses have completely crumbled. Trapped at point-blank range, Rikudo panics because he's stuck in a 50-50 guessing game. Kyle makes the choice for him, lunging in to grab the faster fighter before he can even blink. He lifts him high and slams him into the stone with a heavy thud. Up in the stands, Nazuna and Kyo scream in shock, shouting that he actually landed the throw. Kyle slams him into the dirt, hitting him with enough force to rattle the whole arena floor. Watching from above, the elven woman looks on in disbelief, noting how his perfect defense just completely fell apart. She wonders why he didn't just fire another shot or knock him out of the air like he did earlier. It hits her that he wasn't holding back. He was in a state where he literally couldn't use those moves. The elven woman turns to the masked figure beside her, realizing he understands exactly what just happened. She asks who he is, but he just tells her there's no need to be so guarded. With a grin behind his mask, he explains that he is simply the man who will be fighting the winner of this match later on. He mentions that the strongest fighters from other countries are finally starting to show up. She looks surprised, wondering if the competition is about to get even more crowded. Still, she can't let it go and asks him to explain why the captain was unable to use his moves during that last exchange. He explains it's because Rikudo is what's known as a charge character. To pull off those big moves, he has to spend a few seconds holding back or crouching to build up energy. These attacks are usually much stronger than standard ones, but they come with a catch. The second he stands up or walks forward, he loses that charge and is left wide open. Hearing this, the elven woman finally puts the pieces together. She realizes Kyle knew exactly what kind of fighter Rikudo was before the match even started. Down in the arena, Rikudo admits he's impressed. He didn't think an older guy like Kyle could read his special abilities after seeing them just once. Looking completely baffled, he asks how it's even possible. Kyle just keeps a cool smirk on his face, explaining that practically every middle-aged fighting game veteran on Earth has seen this gimmick 1,000 times before. He thinks back to his younger days, sitting at arcade cabinets, getting pelted by thousands of projectiles and trapped by the same annoying patterns over and over. Having snapped from that frustration, though many times in his past life, he's basically been forged by the struggle. He looks completely locked in now, staring ahead with a grin that says he's finally getting his revenge on the very archetype that used to ruin his nights at the arcade.